stereotyped stereotyped views about these regions are spread around the world, that these lands are backward and unpromising in terms of modern progress and democratic development. And this is one of the big problems for modern research of Central Asia. A twofold struggle is unfolding both in a global arena and in the regional area. The struggle against international terrorism and religious extremism for the former, and a struggle against authoritarian regimes of personal and family power for the latter. Here specifically referring to Central Asia. The outcome of the regional struggle will determine the future of neighboring states such as Russia, China, as well as the relationship between Europe and Asia, or East and West. We know that historically, Central Asia has been the bridge between Europe and Asia since the time of the Great Silk Road, 2nd century BC. Peace and stability of the Central Asia will enable a fruitful intercultural dialogue and a cooperation between East and West. And one of the assurances for a peaceful region is to fight against extremist ideologies and authoritarianism, which are the barriers to the process of democratization in our region, namely the implementation of democratic principles of egalitarianism, people's participation, cultural pluralism, openness in the political system, the rule of law, observance of human rights, freedom, respect and protection of human dignity, fair elections. There are objective and subjective obstacles to the development of a democracy in the post-Soviet Central Asian Republic. These are tribalism, authoritarianism, and corruption. Therefore, democratization in Central Asia presupposes that tribalism, authoritarianism, and corruption should be first and foremost overcome in all spheres of our life, in all spheres of society's life. And here I would like to emphasize that this process is to change your public consciousness, transformation of public consciousness. People's protests in Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan recently, as well as the activities of civil activists, journalists, and human rights organizations in Central Asia, testify that revolutionary change in public consciousness has been emerging. People in our region oppose the usurpation of power and demand freedom, respect for human rights, and genuine democratic reforms. To understand the features of democratization in Central Asia, in our region, it is necessary to learn our rich history, culture, and philosophy. So it's very important. Central Asia people are the descendants of the Indo-Europeans and the heirs of cultural achievements of the most ancient civilizations of the Bronze Age BC, like Andronov culture, Chus culture, Bactrian, ancient nomads, Skims or Sacs, first millennium, and the most ancient like Horaz, Bactria, and Turkic Kaghanate in the Middle Eurasian state. Historical and cultural heritage, philosophical wisdom of the people of Central Asia are expressed not only in Avesta, one of the ancient book, beginning of the first millennium BC, various epics, the Tangrian belief of the ancient Turks, but also in the Enlightenment works of Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, Yusuf Balasagin, Yasavi, Ulugh-Bek, Alisher Navai, as well as modern and contemporary thinkers like Abay Kunalbay, and Chingiz Aytmatov, and others. These Central Asian thinkers and philosophy provide a rich and a solid intellectual and spiritual foundation without which it is impossible to develop an effective democracy in our region with its unique characteristics. So you can see one of the beautiful places of Kyrgyzstan, our mountains and the purest water, lakes, mountains, lakes. The following topics will be discussed during our seminar: the history of the development of ancient and democratic institutions in Central Asia, culture and philosophy as a basis of democracy in Central Asia, Islam and democracy in our region, and socio-political process in Central Asia. Okay. So I would like to emphasize the idea, the importance that when we talk about democratization in Central Asia, we should consider this question, this problem with connection our historical and cultural legacy to understand what our specific, because in our history, in ancient history, we can find ancient democratic institutions like People's Assembly, and we also can find high status of woman, woman like warrior, when we consider Saga's period in the history of people of Central Asia. And we also can find a nomadic culture, a nomadic philosophy, which bases on an idea of freedom, which bases on an idea of open world without any barriers, which also bases on an idea of dialogue. And so many very relevant ideas we can find namely in our ancient ancient history. Okay, And now, dear participants of the seminar, let me give the floor. We can start the first part of our seminar, listen reports of our speakers. And the first speaker is Professor Pulat Shozimov, Tajikistan. The theme of his report is philosophy of right and historical paradoxes, Central Asian context. So I can close my screen presentation. Okay.
Thank you.
And please, Professor Pulat Shozimov, please. Okay, so. Okay, very good. We can see your presentation.
Yes, good, excellent. Dear participants of the seminar, first, I thank the organizer of this seminar, Gulnara Alieva and Sanjarbek Erdalatov, for the invitation to participate in this wonderful event. I would like to say a few words about the Council for Research in Values and Philosophy, named after George MacLean. It's an honor for me to participate at this seminar, as I personally knew Professor MacLean, who studied indeed many problems of society from the point of view of values, culture, and philosophy using cross-civilizations discourse around fundamental questions of modernity. It gives us possibility to see the problem from different perspectives, including as vertical and horizontal levels, and I would try to use this approach during my presentation too. The topic of my speech is the philosophy of right and historical paradoxes in Central Asia context. The most effective way to assess the level of development of national states in Central Asia and their cooperation within the framework of the regional agenda is to analyze the features of interactions between the system of historical and cultural values, economy, and state institutions. This approach reveals the connections in the development of the state building in these countries in philosophical context, allowing us to identify the essential directions of their development, taken both in national and regional context. A high and balanced level of development of social, human, institutional capital in each country is important to hear. At the same time, state institutions and national legislation need to be able to provide real protections for international investment, which requires effective laws free from corruption. Another important indicator of the level of development of modern state is category of rights and freedom, which of course have their own national and civilization specifics. In many ways, the key to understand the specificity lies in their history and culture, which reflect the content of their social capital. Can the democratic procedures of particular state be assessed solely on the basis of the institutional level of its development? Of course, this is an important indicator, but it often happens that excellent laws at the state level, including the constitutions, are not always implemented in the practice. Hence, the effectiveness of state institutions and laws also depends on the level of development of civil society, which not only delegates part of its powers and rights to the state and to protect its property from arbitrary subjectivity, but also requires accountability of the state in fulfilling its obligations toward its citizens. At the same time, if that state calls for the observance of laws, then civil society calls for the protection of its civil interests and individual rights. This nature of their relationship creates conditions for their effective development in terms both of individual rights and freedoms and of following state's law. I believe that the boundaries between civil society and state can be indicated through a categorical conceptual structure. In this regard, I propose defining the concept of civil society through such terms as and methods as individuality, individual rights, subjectivity, autonomy, human capital, individual interest, privileges, ego, economy, and method of rational choice. And that of the state through laws, institutions, politics, responsibility, institutional capital, and the method of social constructivism. Effective interactions between them ensure their sustainable development. Conversely, the weakening of one level leads them to a crisis in the strategic perspectives. At the same time, the effective functioning of civil society clearly depends not so much on the nature and strategy of the relationship between it and the state, as on the system of values that supports the sensibility of human capital, individual subjectivity, and its autonomy in the space of civil society. Violation or manipulation of the basic ontological and value foundations by the state entails the destructions of not only the space of civil society, but also with it the stability of state itself. Attempting to replace the primordial level with the state, level, excluding civil society, renders the state incomplete and incapable for preserving its national interest and political subjectivity in today's global economy. In this work, I use the conceptual and philosophical framework of the great German philosopher Hegel, named his work Elements of Philosophy of Right, which I believe can help us to identify general trends and development of national state in Central Asia through such categorical parameters in their development as morality, ethics, freedom, law, and rights. Moreover, many structural elements of the state development in the region have much in common due to the universality of this categorical structure, which is based on the principle Hegelian logic. Hegel's philosophy of right is manifest in such elements as family, civil society, and the state. This conceptual compositions is firmly embedded in Central Asia context and indeed reveals the strengths and weaknesses of the development of right and the law in the region. Of course, Hegel was unfamiliar with many modern social, economic, and political institutions, such as transnational corporation and the United Nations, which have introduced new conceptual directions of development of Central Asia and its country. All this required some rethinking of his philosophy of right in order to answer questions related to specific of the development of philosophy of right at the level of the second economic configuration, overcoming the first ontological or value configurations of the national state on the basis of relationship between family, community, civil society, and state. I developed this philosophical matrix, as we will see, based on the philosophical logic of Hegel and his key categories: universality, particularity, singularity. In order to put this is a categorical system in the framework of modern time, it's very important to rethink this composition and to find the structure in the modern context. In that case, I included the horizontal and vertical level, and by including the third, I will find the structural way that we can find in the on the level of for his work as philosopher of right. And this is I just focus on this is map and structure only for two configurations. It's ontological or metaphysical configurations. That status quo is family and community, and after that I will show why it's a universality. And if you'll see that this configuration came from the values to the national state, and the second configuration, it's based on the singularity, on the transnational corporation that's very close connected with the component of civil society, and it goes from the economic interest and to the value system on the regional level. I didn't put the thought the thought level. That is not only my task, and that's why if of course it's I don't have so much time in order to explain all details. If you have any questions, please, I will ready to answer on that. Thus, the first element of the philosophy of right is family, which reflects the category of universality, as well as above parameters revealing its universality. It also includes such categories as community, duty, morality, obligations, tradition, memory, unconsciousness, determinism, adherence to rules, and social capital. In modern political and anthropological studies, the methods of primordialism is effectively used to reveal these dimensions in which the value and set moral imperatives of traditional social practice are placed above economic interests and privileges. In order to get confused in the diversity of social categories adapted to the Hegelian universal category of family, I would single out the main indicators of this level for understanding the processes in Central Asia as a history, culture, tradition, and values combined in the category of social capital. Social capital. The history of the formation of social capital in Central Asia includes encounter with Zoroastrianism. According to many historical sources, Zoroaster, the religion founder, was born in this region. Buddhism, which came to China from India via Central Asia, where many historical Buddhist monuments are preserved. Christianity, Islam, traditional Central Asia form of belief, and Sufi tariqas, which link Islam with traditional cultural and social practice of Central Asia. The region peoples have also lived under various political structure and ideology, such as the ancient Persian Empire of Achaemenid and Sassanid, the conquest of Central Asia by Alexander the Great, and the building the Greece polis based on the various system of Hellenistic period of ancient Greece, Islam, the Mongolia and Turkish political and cultural system, and ideology of communism in USSR until its collapse and the creations of national ideology and values in Central Asia, 5 modern independent republics of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. At the same time, it's worth noting that all these values have peacefully coexist with the history and culture of Central Asia, especially in 9th, 10th centuries, a period that Adam Matz called as Muslim, called the Muslim Renaissance, when Central Asia was the center of innovations, various fields of knowledge. During this period, various social, intellectual, religious, and cultural practices coexist, and there was very strong competition between various social, political, and cultural centers, seeking to invite the best scientists, philosophers, and poets. The great scientists and poets from the regions included the Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, Al-Biruni, Kharizmi, Rudaki, and others. When considering Central Asians as social capital, we cannot omit the outstanding Sufi school tariqa leaders who preserved the pluralistic values of Muslim culture during its rise and brought them to the modern generation, express its mystical form of spiritual connections with of man with God and himself. The main Sufi orders in Central Asia prominence orders such as Kubraviya, Isaviya, and Naqshbandiya. All these factors cannot be ignored when analyzing social capital of Central Asia and its components. To concretize the social capital of Central Asia, which has a common history and culture in its main directions of development, is worth referring to Franz Fukuyama, trust. In Central Asia, the family is expressed in terms community, clan, tribe for Turkic people, and outlawed for Tajiks. The legitimacy of primordial communal social ties of the family in Central Asia still plays a more significant role in the distribution of political power and economic resources. Values in Central Asia are most important at the first ontological level of the family and community. Family, community, civil society, value conditions for transition. He is important for the transition to the next level of the formation of rights and freedom, to establish how far a person has freedom and the right to manifest their individuality in the civil sector, taken in the Central Asian context. The Central Asian context is a meeting place, a free world religion, which have been adopted by the peoples of this region. Most Central Asian follows a tolerant version of Islam. Both Islam and Christianity state that idea of the equality of people and nations. Islam says that all people and nations are descended from Adam, so all people are brothers and equal before God. This gives the family a universal value, meaning that the traditional institutions of the peoples of Central Asia, tribes, clan, avlod, and all other social institutions and people are equal to each other at this ontological level, as it's confirmed by the region's traditional system of morality. The pre-Islamic Zoroastrian doctrine of struggle, good and evil can become the basis of dual epistemological system of civil society, in which the principles of truth and conformity of good thought, word, and actions are respected. In the rational philosophical system of Muslim culture, as represented by Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina, the values of reason and happiness are fixed and can be articulated in the space of civil society. A person's faith and their intellectual capability through reasons as a way to achieve divine truth along with the faith of the community, show their dignity and capabilities. Rise and decline on civil society in the history of Central Asia, 9th and 12th century. If you ignore the details and consider the key directions of development for Central Asia as a whole in terms of family, civil society, state structure, from the high point of the Muslim Renaissance in the Central Asia in 9th, 10th centuries into today, we can see that the region's development in strategic perspective was interrupted after 12th century. The rise of Central Asia was associated with a balance form of interactions between the universality, family, and singular civil society, categorical system of values and freedom of moment. At the end of the 11th century, however, saw the beginning of harsh criticism of the rational school of thought of Muslim culture regarding the philosophy of Al-Farabi in Ibn Sina by famous Seljuk Vizir Nizam Mulk and the outstanding Islamic theologian and Sufi Al-Ghazali. Development and innovations gave way to political stability and rigid traditionalism. This led to the Muslim world and Central Asia in particular to a rather interesting social political configurations. This paradox of history led to the unfinished idea of state building in the Muslim world in the form of family, community, and state structure, with the level of civil society seen as destabilizing for both the state and orthodox foundation of traditional Islam, effectively eliminated. As a result, Central Asia developed in response to the seemingly universal basis for the state development from 9th to 12th centuries, a wholly paradoxical political structure adapted to protecting the stable existence of state and religion. This form is still a model of political development. I would call it a sultanate, a kind of synthesis of the family, community, and state, with civil society absence on weak. Of course, Central Asia has made serious and positive progress in the development of civil society today, but the latter remains weak, and it's always under the strict control of both the authorities. When the space of civil society is limited due to the link between family and state, the social radius of family is limited to the level of biology and blood relations. In this regard, it loses its universality, which gains its legitimacy through the religious and metaphysical level. This leads to the deformation of human rights and freedoms at the state level, as the original basis of values is universality, literally reduced to the biological and physiological level. As a result, the right and laws at the state level no longer depends on the system of universal values laid down at the primordial level, but on which tribe, genus, region, or avlod a person belongs to. Nationalization of the element of civil society in Central Asia, voiced from 12th century. Here we can see that the civil society is extension of social community, where the latter already includes many components of civil institutions, the mahalla as example, or the state, where the border between them practically don't exist, and orientations toward the desire to implement the centralization of civil institutions such as mahalla. As such, when considering the element of Hegel philosophy of right, in the context of Central Asia, it's worth noting is the extreme instability of civil society in this region, arising from problems with unclear basic understanding of the ontological space of the family, considering the value system at the primordial level as particular rather than universal category, leads to a limitation of the extent of social trust as a level of civil society, thereby creating instability of this level due to inability to protect their interests to the lack of individuality, autonomy, and self-sufficiency, which are protected at the first ontological level. The first, now I would like to see the formation of philosophy of right on this example of Tajikistan. It's Tajikistan case from 1992-2000. The most striking example of the formations of the social, national, family, community, civil society, state structure came in Tajikistan in 92 and 2000, between the collapse of Soviet Union and formations of the state institutions, with all the main components characteristic of the normal cell. During the period from 1992 to 1997, the values of the Tajik people were redefined, specifically who Tajik belongs to in terms of values and language, a Soviet calcified and constructed national identity, or a pro-Iranian Persian civilization and historical territory. The first wave of the cultural elite associated Tajik with the universal Persian form of identity, focused on their great historical common heritage. The difficulty that Tajiks belong to the Sunni branch of Islam, while Iranians belong to the Shia, was removed by their shared culture and history. This discourse was established as a synthesis of democratic and Islamic forces, which also appeared to the great historical part of Muslim culture. This trend was countered by the government position, which focused on the Soviet and secular form of identity. The opposition in terms of values led to bloody civil war that lasted from 1992 to 1997 until the parties reached a political compromise, where the pro-government structure offered the united Tajik opposition UTO 30% of the country government post. Russia, Iran, Afghanistan, and UN were the guarantor of the negotiations. After signing of the peace treaty, it may be said that foundation for the formations of civil society were laid from 1997 to 2000. Various civil institutions and community periodically joined the negotiations of the National Reconciliation Commissions from the government and the UTO, which marked the creation of civil society through the signing of the peaceful social contract between Tajik government and the UTO. During the negotiations and the activations of public discourse, they drove the symbolic, cultural, religious, and most importantly, political resources that reflect the balance of power. The symbol of this union was the national state of Ismail Samani, creator of the first Tajik state where religious and secular worldview and various religious beliefs peacefully coexisted. This period coincides with the renaissance of Muslim culture in 19th centuries. As a result, during the National Reconciliation Commission's negotiations, the procedure for holding free presidential elections were agreed upon. The country's first national currency Samani was created. The monument of Ferdowsi in Dushanbe was replaced by one to Samani, symbolizing the reconciliations between the various political forces. Thus was Tajik identity was constructed. However, the community state, civil society state structure proved unstable. Pluralistic principle came to be replaced by the harsh ideological confrontation between state nationalism and Islamism. At the first, there were value-based confrontations between statesmen and Islamist political Islam, which has legalized in Tajikistan from 1997 to 2015, but later marginalized and removed from political place of the state due to military and political sabotage by the opposition, the Islamic Party of Renaissance of Tajikistan. Currently, this party has been designated as a terrorist group, and its followers and adherents are being harshly prosecuted. Conclusion. This article shows that despite the differences in terms of right and freedom in various societies, these trends have universal character, being linked to the unified nature of human consciousness and of the course of any cultural, historical, economic, and political process follow a pattern. It is worth noting that the world is increasingly moving from the first ontological configuration to the second, where the transition is not from values to the national state, but from economy, transnational corporations already expressed in the form of civil society to regional values through institutional procedures of interstate relations. In this context, Central Asia can become a space where the economic interests of the 5 countries come to the fore, and their relationships can be built on the principle of civil society. This is another chance to form a civil society in Central Asia. And I believe that these expectations will be justified for this unique and beautiful region. And this is this table. I don't have, unfortunately, the time, but if you'll see that it the first ontological configurations, and they use the different disciplines and categories that interact with each other. Because we talk about different languages, maybe we'll use different terms or notions, but it will be this. It is about the same, as it's connected with our common universal human consciousness. That's all. Thank you very much for your attention. Now
Okay, so thank you very much, dear Professor Pulat Shozimov. Very informative. Okay. So during discussion, I think that some participants will have questions for you. So we can see that democratization is connected with the process of change of generations. The main participants in a people's protest in Central Asia against authoritarianism are young people, young generation. So therefore, the theme of the young generation is historically significant for us, for Central Asia, because we can see that this is a completely new generation, of the generation of internet, of a digital society, digital type, which has access to information. And they is distinguished by its critical thinking. So therefore, this question about youth, about young generation, is of paramount importance. So let me give the floor Professor Aliya Masalimova from Al-Farabi Kazakh National University. She is Vice Rector for Social Development. And the topic of her report is Youth in a Modern Social and Cultural Realities of Kazakhstan, Generation Gap and Emotional Intelligence. So please, dear Professor, Masalimova, please.
Okay.
Glad to see you.
Good evening, Professor Cholpon Alieva. Dear participants, can I show the presentation?
Yes, yes, you can use PowerPoint presentation, and you should have access to screen.
Oh,
Please try.
yeah, so
demonstration screen.
Okay, just a moment. Demonstration. So this.
And I would like also say that Aliya Masalimova is expert of the development international education in Central Asia. She is expert on the development of philosophical education.
Okay.
Yes, we can see.
Because you can see?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, start.
So the dear participants of the webinar, on behalf of the Kazakhstan and the Al-Farabi Kazakh National University, allow me express my gratitude Professor Cholpon Alieva for the invitation and the opportunity to participate in the discussion for topical issues of our time. And also to congratulate on the upcoming International Women's Day. So my topic is related to my field of activity at university, and I just briefly presented some information about our university. I can show just a moment, and now, as you know, the 2 years of the pandemic have, as you know, is 2 years of the pandemic have significantly affected the world and human life on a global scale. At the same time, the events taking place in Ukraine, the economic conflicts regarding Russia, the tragic January events in our country determine the agenda of our discussion. Now and so all humanity in the 21st century lives in a rapidly changing world. The age of the high technologies, scientific achievements, information culture generate more and more new forms of human interaction, differences of the levels of material prosperity and culture in general. According to the scientists, the paradigm of human development is changing. Indeed, scientific and technology achievements are inextricably linked with the change in culture as a whole. They form a new image of reality and a person who is involved in the potentially unlimited circle of communication and information exchange. As a part of my speech, the emphasis is placed on youth. As a social demographic group, young people are not only the main part of the human resource, but also the driving force. It has a higher adaptive capacity for the ongoing change, as well as a higher and higher quality ability to reproduce. According to the social biology characteristic, is natural replenishes the human resource and change of qualitativity. However, there is a sufficient amount of research in science about youth as a social phenomenon, about the types, functionality, and potential. However, how successfully or not successfully young people cope with the change taking place in the world, and particularly with the modern challenge. So, and with modern challenge and threats in the face of the COVID-19, ambitious geopolitical situation, economic crisis, and the other types determines the relevance of this field of research. And it is also worth noting that is a high adaptability and also has a negative side, unfortunately leading to a generation gap and low emotional intelligence. Modern researchers are dealing with the problem of the fear of generation. Studying this question, in my opinion, will help to understand why we often talk about the searchers of the Z generation and their typical nature. The purpose of my topic is to reveal the searchers of the modern youth of Kazakhstan in the new social cultural realities, and also try to identify the cause of the generation gap and the influence of emotional intelligence on young people. It should be noted that I am developing a research project, the main task of which is to find ways to overcome this gap, creating conditions for the young people for the more successful forms of interaction with the world and within our social age groups. As you know, the scientific theory of generation was created by the Neil Howey and William Strauss, in which they identified the following types of generation. We can show in my slides. Within the framework of the topic, we consider the average portrait of the young people belonging specifically to Generation Z, measuring maths born approximately from 1997 to 2012, from the 25 to 10 years. According to the generation tier, the Zoomers are united by a commitment to the use of the modern technologies. Research equates the young people within the term digital person. Science, technology, and art are close to them. For example, it is assumed the main representatives of the generation will be engaged in engineering and technical issues, biomedicine, and robotics. According to the founders of the theory, Generation Z is the first generation which is completely born during the times of globalization and postmodernism. And therefore, it is much easier for the coexist in social, cultural, and technological realities than the previous one who need to constantly catch up. However, despite a period of 15 years, the difference between 25 Zoomers and 29 is the felt. Graduation occurs in the 3 stage of 5 years. A later sub-generation of Zoomer has a better set of skills and knowledge, competence. It is the consumption and analysis of information that is much faster. According to research, young people, Generation Z, live in a completely different world compared to the producers. For them, digital services and technologies are not integral part of the everyday life. Researchers say that this generation is characterized by a desire to engage in prestigious professions, such as those where heavy physical labor is not required, and for which a high level of training and high education are required. Modern youth, Zoomers, react quite sharply to issues related to geopolitical conflicts. For example, there is an active civil position toward the conflicts between Russia and Ukraine, which is manifested not only by activity in social networks, but also by active participation in the volunteer work. They have a conscientious attitude to the ecosystem of the planet. They adhere to the policy of conscious consumption, which deserves the title of the 30 generation. An example is the Swedish youth adheres the Lagom philosophy. And in general, they have a completely different set of values. The researchers point out that Generation Z differed significantly from the previous ones in the attitude to knowledge. It is perception and use. The value of knowledge is replaced by the value of information and ways to define each. If you move from the general world, a portrait of the Zoomers to the Kazakh, one of the portraits is formed in this way. A national report is a report of youth of Kazakhstan, and over the past national report of youth is published annually in Kazakhstan. And over the past 5 years, large-scale research has been conducted in the Kazakhstan. On their basis, the key macro trend of youth highlighted. These reports are used to make strategic decisions on the field of the communication, marketing, advertising, aimed primarily at solving the problems of young people. So the modern youth of Kazakhstan is a generation that was born and grew up during a period of serious political, social, and economic transformation. These are young people with their own view of the world, position, and values. The development of technology, the internet, and open access to any information has made modern youth self-sufficient, ambitious, and talented. In 2017, the trend of urban Kazakh youth were described. This was the first study. One of the conclusions of the project is that Kazakh-speaking youth will be the most promising youth segment in terms of the number of 5 and 10 years in the future. Raise the open Kazakh-minded youth for whom it is natural and customary to think in the Kazakh language. Therefore, the 2019 study was focused specifically on the study of Kazakh-minded youth. So some of the conclusions of the work done in the following table was shared by head of the research company, Alexander Rozanov, at the Kazakh Marketing Conference 20. We can see in my slide in presentation. So, according to the research of Institute of Applied Ethnopolitical Studies by Dana Shimkhanova, today the specificity of Kazakh youth lays in kind of symbiosis of value orientations, namely in the intersection in the layering of traditional and modern views. At the same time, Kazakhstan youth is characterized by such global trends as a high mobility and digitalization. Related to more recent studies, as an example, a study conducted by the BISAM Center as a Research Center in the 2020, which was conducted in the form of representative sociological survey among young people aged 14 to 29 years. The study was based on the German methodology of the Shelf Youth Study, conducted in Germany Science 1953, where academic institutions and institutions conduct research documenting the attitudes, opinions, and expectations of young people in the Germany. Christopher Moore noted the Kazakh youth under 29 years old is almost the half of the population of Kazakhstan. Therefore, it is an important social player. On each depends what the future of Kazakhstan will look like. On the basis of the study, the specifics of Kazakhstan, Kazakh youth, their lifestyle, their aspirations, priorities were studied. In addition, a pool of the most pressing problems that concerned the modern youth of the country was identified. According to the researchers, there are always differences and divisions between the youth and the adult generation. They need to be reduced. Kazakh scientists and researchers Dina Garipova, studying the problem in the context of educational strategy of young people, presented some results of the study. You can see in my slides, this is some statistics. And so, according to the study, 44% of rural youth are unemployment. This number included school children from the age of the 14. The 35 of urban youth are looking for work or are out of the work. But if you look at the preference, the majority of young people would like to work in the public sector. 10.8% would like to work in the international organization. This is due to guarantees a social package which the scientists shade the results. It is important to note that the number of children who are engaged in volunteer work is increasing in Kazakhstan. 13% participate in the volunteering. The author of the analytical report emphasized. Among other issues, the youth noted that it is necessary to deal with the environmental problems in the country. What do these figures mean? These statistics correlate with the events that took place in January 2022, when protest sentiments got out of control and turned it into the threat to undermine the integrity of the state. In all speeches, the president of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, noted this disproportion that created the prerequisites for social discomfort. He also noted that recent events have shown an acute problem with the employment in the western and southern regions. Due to the high birth rate, the economy is not keeping pace with the job creation. Educated citizens are more competitive nationwide, have a better chance of success and a decent life. In this regard, the government was instructed to develop separate directions for these regions within the framework of state programs, as well as to increase the number of grants and generally improve the quality of education in the country. In general, the main conclusions of the study are that youth the Kazakhstan is apolitical. There is a shift more involved in volunteer activities. Paternalistic attitude toward the state. The state does not deal with the problem of youth. According to the youth, it is necessary to deal within issues of improving the quality of education, environmental issues, and solving problems with employment, concluded researchers. If you go back to the statistic of the study, young people under the age of the 29 make up half of almost 50%. It makes sense to talk about the raise a serious problem related to unemployment. This factor increases the risk of the repetition of protest moods in our side. The President of State noted that Kazakhstan need to take a course towards a hearing state and listen to our youth. This idea was announced earlier, but unfortunately in January, we were faced with local ignoring on the ground solutions to this problem. The main part of the protesters turned out to be young people, dissatisfied with the social political situation in the country. Thus, within the framework of studying the problem of the generation gap, we note that is expressed in the three aspects: goal setting, value, and information. What the future will be, we will be able to determine by looking at the Zoomers. They set the main trend for development. And one of the trends is the search for an alternative. Is one of the parents belonging the later generation Z or Y works as a doctor or lawyer. This doesn't mean it a representative of generation Z will choose their way. Own ways are about modern youth, which make this generation unique. It speaks about their own goal setting. One example is their rapid growth in the blog sphere and mass media, especially for Forbes KZ analytic company. Hype Editor conducted a study to find out what the ecosystem of bloggers and TikTok influencers look like in Kazakhstan. About statistics, today there are up to the 450,000 influencers, bloggers, and up to 6,000 TikTok influencers in Kazakhstan. The mindset of the representatives of Generation Z is clearly focused on the processing information in small portions. Large takes a large amount of information they process and perceive with difficulty. They are characterized by clip thinking. According to the statistic, those who are now 30 or more years old were brought out on books, but Generation Z thinks in completely different categories. They perceive the world through short, vivid images and message of TV, news, or video clips. They do not try to understand the written phrase in this entirety. The gap in the value aspect in comparison with a previous Generation Z Generation Z is in no hurry to procreate earlier, but this is due to the fact that they are more consciously approaching the creation of the family. For example, according to the results of opinion polls, representatives of Generation Z are guided by the one family for life model. It can be concluded that modern youth entering adulthood set their life priority in this way. Education, career, and self-development come to the fore. Today, Kazakhstani youth also adhere to this trend, getting on education, building a career, and striving for a stable life. They put marriage and family on the back burner. A recent speech of the member of the Corpus of Youth Deputies, Kristina Shafikova, confirmed that this trend, the short list of problems, the short list of problems faced by our youth today, guaranteeing work, housing, and the opportunity to spend leisure time with dignity. Consequently, the statistics of late marriage are also relevant for Kazakhstan. A modern young family adheres to the decision to have one child, or generally prefer to adhere to the child-free policy. Unfortunately, our youth is characterized by a high of the divorces. So 2020 marked itself as a year of divorces in divorces. In Kazakhstan, only in Almaty, out of the 9,000 marriages, about the 5,000 broke up before living up to year. This very aspect causes condemnation and misunderstanding of the part of older generations. One of the reasons for such dynamic of divorces, psychologists call in development emotional intelligence. In the book Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Be More the IQ by Daniel Goleman. So why it can mean more than it is accurate that the IQ and emotional intelligence are separate competence. This and sufficiently developed level of the competence, such as emotional awareness, emotion management, self-motivation, empathy, and emotion recognition, lets our youth the passive aggressions. Hence, it's sometimes easier for them to quit what they started than they finish it. It contains all spheres of life: education, work, and family life. According to the Steven Novitsky, psychologist in Emory University, who has studied nonverbal abilities, children who cannot read or successfully express emotion are constantly frustrated. They don't really understand what's going on. This kind of communication is a constant subtext of everything you do. You can't stop showing your facial expression or posture or height to tone of your voice. If you make a mistake in what kind of message you send, you constantly feel that people react strangely to you. You get a decisive rebuff and do not know why. As a result, they feel powerless, depressed, and different. Daniel Goleman also argued that when moving along his trajectory leading the divorce, the tragic consciousness of the lack of emotional competence becomes self-evident. Criticism and contempt, readiness for the self-defense, defensive wall, distressing thoughts, and the flooding with emotions such a cycle indicated the disintegration of emotional self-awareness and self-control, empathy, and the ability to calm each other on the oneself. The first years of the new millennium herald the age of melancholy, just as the 20th century became the age of anxiety. International date point is a phenomenon that apparently can be called a modern epidemic of depression, spreading along with the transition the modern lifestyle. All over the world, every next generation since the turn of the century has lived as a higher risk than their parents of experiencing severe depressions, not just melancholy, but paralyzing indifference, depressed mood, and self-pity, as well as the overwhelming hopelessness about the course of life. And these attacks appear in the increasingly early age. This strengthening of the individualism, the fading of faith in the religion, support from society and the large family caused the loss of spiritual resources. Young people had gone through the consciousness of the failures and mistakes. In this regard, in order to overcome the generation gap in modern social culture reality, the following is necessary. Each generation needs to upgrade its own emotional intelligence. People with high emotional intelligence are socially balanced, friendly, and always in the great mood. They are not subject to fear and are not prone anxious reflections. They are obligatory in the relation the people and initiate cases, willingly their responsibility and adhere to ethical principles, and communicating with others. They are friendly and caring. This emotional life is eventful, but within the proper limits. They are in the harmony with themselves, with others, with others and with the society in which they live. Conduct comparative studies to study problematic issues taking into account these social cultural realities, mentality, hedge possible the risks. They take measures of systematic nature at the level stage programs, proceed from the requirements of young people while preserving the existing intellectual social capital of societies. So it's some conclusion. It's my end of the speech. Thanks for your attention. And I think as I try to outline this problem, if you have any question, I'm ready to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Aliya Masalimova, for your so detailed report, which focuses on cultural problem of young generation. So thank you very much. Okay. And so that Central Asia is a region. Islam at the 8th century, moderate Islam. It's also like so. So next report of the Professor Baurzhan Todorova. She is a specialist in Sufism in Islam, Professor Baurzhan Todorova, and her theme of a report, Islam, Sufism in a Central Understanding Difference. Please.
Thank you, Professor Alieva. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Between the United States and Central Asia, one Balkanian representative hope for a balance. First, let me express my special gratitude to Professor Cholpon Alieva for the kind invitation and the opportunity to participate today. Also to Hu Yeping for our long-term cooperation, fruitful cooperation. She's a real adept, let me use this word from Sufism, of Father MacLean in organizing not only interesting, but very prominent and actual, as we see, workshops. So my report is about Islam in democracy in Central Asia, including Sufism, with an attempt for better understanding. To understand the difference, it's important to situate Islam in its social and political dynamics and observe the significance of religion in the formation of collective forms of belonging, as well as a marker of difference between and within communities in Central Asia. Also to understand some misconceptions. Let's see the first one. Islam is unitary. Islam is a flexible dogma that removes the element of choice of individual lives, and there is little diversity in Islam. When we are talking about Islam in Central Asia, we can describe living Islam with attempt to renewal again and again, which units Muslims behind theological and moral precepts. And we can see Islam which demonstrate a great diversity, demonstrate a culture that can accommodate democracy. But for better understanding the features of democratization in Central Asia, it's necessary to learn its rich history, culture, and especially philosophy. When analyzing the receptivity of modern Muslim communities to democracy, Western experts often look the kind of social structure of the first community of Muslims, so believe that the norms of this first community in the past must necessarily define Muslim community of the present. Democracy, as we know it, is the expression of people's will. In earlier generations, when populations were small, there was no need for casting of the ballot. The views of the people were aired in the public sphere, generally in the mosque. Muslim Jurists did not know the meaning of words democracy. Democracy was a consensus emerging from the free expression of the will of the small community, as well as the implementation of Quranic ideas that we know to be intrinsic to democratic society: tolerance, pluralism, justice. So let's look in the past. Medina is an example of good governed by consensus and consultation. There is no explicit mention of democracy in the Quran because it was not a word in use in 7th century. Unfortunately, the social and political structures of Medina at the time of the Prophet were replaced with exceptionalism models that were resistant to adaptability and change. Islamists and dictators disregarding not only the pluralism, but the democratic governance of the Medina at the time of the Prophet. The Muslim in Central Asian republics at the former Soviet Union must be included in the list of democratic countries nowadays. Of course, we have bear in mind that there are considerable ideological and religious variations among the 5 new independent states. I prefer to follow scholars like Abdul Soroush, who argues that Islam and democracy are not only compatible, but their association is inevitable. So we can outline 2 main foundations for democracy in this region: freedom and evolution. And we can trace this spirit of freedom and evolution of consciousness, especially in the young generation, in the narratives of the 5 countries. Kazakhstan. Most of the land that makes up modern-day Kazakhstan was part of the Russian Empire, later of the United States. Kazakhstan became independently in 1991. A series of massive protests started in Kazakhstan at the beginning of this year. They began peacefully, spread quickly in other cities in the country, especially the largest city, Almaty. After entering into violent riots, you can see during Radio Free Europe how many people were arrested and how many people were killed. President promised reform. Same situation in Kyrgyz Republic. Here, the turning point is the Tulip Revolution, which led to the election of the new president. In December 2006, constitutional changes maintained a strong president, but codified some of the positive changes, such as strong multi-party system into law. In November 2021, young people come again to the street to protest against the parliamentary elections, and actually my hope is in this new generation. Tajikistan, the country developed into civil war immediately after independence from the Soviet Union. Here we can see all signs of democracy, multiple parties, shared power, constitution, but in reality, the government rules in an authoritarian manner with small circles of advisors. Turkmenistan, same story. Elected son of ex-president Niyazov was condemned as corrupt by international community The president has most governmental power security in his hands. Press freedom is all but not exist. Uzbekistan. Same story. President Karimov, who is the first secretary of the Communist Party in Uzbekistan, was elected, re-elected again and again. The state has the trappings of democracy, but again are governed by authoritarian regime. So if we summarize, we can say that all states here have trappings of democracy, but are governed by authoritarian regimes. The concept of freedom is applied in the context that the people must be free to select their government and laws. Recent People's Rally in Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan testify that a revolutionary change in public consciousness has been emerging. People in Central Asia proving in a better way that Islam is about consent and people's participation and rights, requiring that leaders should serve the interests of the people or be replaced by them. The main problem is that Islam is being used for political purposes, and political power prevails over Islamic principles of consensus and pluralism. Nowadays, the authoritarian regime has focused all attention and all national resources on containing Democrats instead of containing extremists, and used the crises that they are created to justify those same policies that cause the crisis. So the big challenge to modern day Muslims is to preserve the message of Islam as a message of liberation from the fanatics, the bigots, and the forces of dictatorship. Because all Muslims are guaranteed the right to reach a consensus about social and political conduct appropriate to changing times. The message of Islam, ordained for humankind, is to live in peace, social justice, and equality. The so-called, by Alexander Benning, parallel Islam, Sufism, is part here of the religious pluralism. And I mentioned Alexander Benning because, according to him, Sufism is neither a sect nor a movement of renegades, but is an inseparable part of true Islam. I mention here Sufism because many of Western analysts are apt to close their eyes to this reality and refer to Sufism as a phenomenon foreign to Islam, which not only deviated it from Islam, but links Sufism with extremism, using that Sufism appears as social activity and struggle. Linking Islam with extremism and terrorism in the region is the result of the link of Islamic extremism with Wahhabism. Attempts are being made to instill Wahhabism, which we should underline is unfamiliar ideology for local people, in the republics of Central Asia. We remember that terroristic threats here have increased at the end of 19th. The Islamic schools created and financed by the Saudi Arabia in the beginning of 19th are on the model of Sufi sects and facilitated this process. Religious extremists mobilize the spiritual power of Islam and the original spiritual practices of Sufism. For example, zikr, public or silent pronunciation of the God's name. Zikr turns into one of the ways to prepare the soldiers of Allah. The degrees of preparation for the achievement of full fusion with God serve, except for training of spirit, also for educational methodology for jihad. Hakikat is the highest degree immortality. Jihadists use it, promise eternity. They also use some practice, reading the life of saints, repeatedly 24 hours zikr, position and state of mediation, silent contemplation of God, especially nonsense of pain. At the end, we have individuals who are in the state of trance, absolutely fulfill commands on the Shem, awakening, concentration, preparation, implementation, and fulfillment. In this way, Islam is connected to extremism and terrorism. Actually, the main features of Sufism are religious passion related to the values of Islam, strict following the norms of Islamic law, sympathy to the poor, and high political activity. It is underestimated two things: the role of sheikhs in the region and the influence of Sufism in a broader context. The role of Sufi sheikhs is exclusively strong for the social political life of the countries, and there is not antagonism between them and secular power. This tolerance is due to traditional connections and mutual interest. The majority of teachers in madrasa are mainly members of tariq who disseminate the ideas of Sufism. Their entire province under the control of Sufi sheikhs, Qadiriya, Taifuriya, Suhrawardiya, Naqshbandiya. Even the Soviet government did not destroy the Sufi orders, just fragmented them. The ongoing religious renaissance, which then emphasizes on Islam as an integral part of national identity, allows the orders to be restored. The key element is their hierarchy, which does not allow the penetration of foreign channels of influence. And the influence of Sufism in a broader context. The most famous Sufi sheikh here is Ahmad ibn Ibrahim al-Yasavi and his sect Yasaviya. I pointed this name here because his influence on the other Sufi sects, Helvetia, which is the leading Sufi sect in North Africa, with the influence of both branches, Rachmaniya and Tijaniya. Sufism contributes to the consolidation of Algerian society as well as the stability of the country, taking a direct part in politics. Helvetia is a pillar of mystical Islam in Algeria. A moral and socio-religious factors in influence of other cultural traditions, example Berber culture. And I stress your attention on these sects because Sufi teachings are used in Algeria to fight radical Islamists. The study of Sufi ideas and traditions can be an important antidote to the puritanical versions of Islam relevant today. The analysis of this sect is also important from the point of view of studying the history of anti-colonial struggle in Algeria, and especially to see the connection between Sufi orders and popular movements. In order to properly understand modern Islam and its role and place in the public sphere in Central Asia, deep transformation affecting society and culture during the Soviet period must be traced and analyzed. Russian rule necessitated a new approach to religion in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This approach was revolutionary in nature and had long-term consequences. Secular attitude dominate despite the growing growth of active practitioners in recent years. The need for reform leads to the reformulation of Islamic ideals and to constructive change not only in the religious, but also in the educational and social sphere. Like the rest of Muslim world, Muslims are looking in some positive models and those elements that would be useful for the modernization of their society, namely technology, economy, especially education system. Islam itself is becoming a driver of change, open to challenges, and the Islamic tradition is being redefined to include the idea of social culture revolution. Islam is closely linked to traditions and national values. So the conversation to religion is seen as a return to cultural and moral sources. A combination of internal and external factors led to the local response primarily associated with the negative consequences of the Soviet command administrative authoritarian system of governance and the tribal structure of indigenous society. The Soviet ideology of totalitarianism ruled out any other worldview, pluralism, free and critical thinking. Clan and tribal interests still dominate the political structure and personal policy in the Central Asian states, accompanied with the growing socio-economic inequalities. We can argue that it is an answer to failed economic development which do not bring equal benefit, according to the social egalitarianism promoted by the Islamic faith. Any attempt by Soviet atheist ideology to restrict religious practice was experienced as a threat to personal and group identity and moral values too. There is a feeling of victimhood created by domestic oppression, combined with an empathy for similar oppressed peoples in Central Asia. This found expression in a sense of solidarity and the visible demonstrations on the streets. Every time something happens, the authority responds with one word: pressure, high pressure, and even greater pressure. This leads to greater resistance and more conflict, and the solution is to fight against this authoritarian way of government, which are the barriers to the process of democratization in the region, namely the implementation of democratic principles of egalitarianism, people participation, cultural pluralism, openness in the political system, rule of law, observance of human rights, freedom, respect and protection of human dignity, fair elections. Democracy is supported in Islam by the concept of ijma, consensus. Quran also mentioned diversity, so difference can and do exist. Islam clearly indicates the government to rule with justice, to promote the public interest, to help the needy, and not to benefit the rich at the expense of the poor. Thus, people must consult and build a consensus for a just society. Therefore, democratization in Central Asia presupposes that tribalism and authoritarianism should be first and foremost overcome in all spheres of society's life. The concept secular, used to denote separation of state and religion in Western sense and word, when translated to other languages, often means atheism. In Central Asia, this may suggest the need for new terminology. I am keen to support Abdul Filali Ansari's view that we should refer directly to the individual building blocks of democracy: free election, respect of rights, freedom of speech and faith, opportunity for education. More than term secularism connotes the compatibility of Islam and democratic values. So my hope is Sufism, who may become the cause of closeness of a people's peace, salam, which is also the cause of real Sufism. All 5 republics here in Central Asia have trapping democracy. Democracy is a universal value, and significant is the concept of Islam as a vehicle for personal and national reform, as a symbol of resistance to oppression, not only in domestic but in the global level, as an egalitarian ethos, as a moral religious culture system, and as a path for bridging the East and the West. And I always remember my conversation with Father McLean and admire his attempt to create bridges between different people's hearts and minds to create a better and more humanistic world. That's why I would like to wish to all my colleagues and friends in Central Asia, in occasion of the upcoming Nowruz, a lot of health, a lot of peace, and let the wisdom prevail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Professor Bogdanov, for your report, for your so wide observation of development of Islam in different countries of Central Asia. Thank you very much. Okay, and now, dear colleagues, we're gonna start discussion on the main issues of the reports. First, 3 reports. At the beginning of our discussion, I would like to give the floor to Professor Mikhail Baranik from United States of America. He's a practical specialist in Afghanistan, in Central Asia. So, dear Professor Michael Baranik, what do you think? What is your opinion about our situation?
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me. I'll start by saying there is no democracy in Central Asia. There's the illusion of democracy. I've taught in Kabul University, I've taught in Azerbaijan University, I've taught in Armenia University, I've taught in Kyrgyz universities, three universities in Kyrgyzstan, Manas, American University, and now in Almaty. And one of the things I see, and Aliya brought it up, with values. Values is a cornerstone of any society. When I meet my students for the first time, especially freshmen, if they're late, I say 20 Psalms. And they don't challenge me or anything. They give me 20 Psalms. Men and women alike. And so at the end of the class, somewhere in between the class, I said, why do you do it? They said, because you're in a position of authority. You can hurt me. That kind of value and beliefs, because remember, you got values, beliefs, attitude, and behavior. First of all, I have 2 PhDs, one in psychology and one in economics. I was a therapist before. I've worked for Kazakh as his advisor in Afghanistan for many, many years. I also worked as an advisor to head of Alieva in Azerbaijan. So I'm not a typical American who reads books and then writes. I was a practitioner most of my life. Just recently that I started teaching. But when you look at the cycle, you got a value, a belief, an attitude, a behavior. And what I think is missing is, you can have elections, and that's what usually everybody says. Well, elections, we're a democracy. Well, the former president of Kazakhstan said in one of his speeches is that rushing to democracy is more chaotic and causes more stress. What I think he meant is that you have to have the institutions, but the institutions are good. But if you don't have the values and what you stand for, and the purpose of government is to take care of its people, not its friends, not its buddies, not its relatives, but it's to take care of the people. And I don't see that existing. We spent $3 trillion in Afghanistan for nothing. And so all my students that come in, I ask them, okay, what is the value? They don't understand the value. I ask them the structure, let's come up with your 10 most important values. If they can get 2 or 3, and it's usually family, and then the next one may be religion, but they don't understand what a value is, what is a terminal value, and what's a transitional value. And so they don't have that mentality. They have the mentality that if somebody in authority tells you to do something, you do it without question. So then when you look at the evolution of the countries, the people who got when 1991, when independence happened, the people who got control were the old former Soviet Politburo members. So they had one thing in mind: maintain control. And now today what you see is a lot of people who are the sons or daughters of the former Politburo members running the country. And they still, have the mentality, maintain control. Machiavelli said, get control and keep control. Well, in the two countries in the central region that has something of value, that a commodity that everybody wants, Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan, they have dictators. Because he who controls the government controls the resources of the nation. And he can do whatever he wants with it. So you really don't have a democracy. And I think the reason why is because the values the people have, is not conducive. They haven't developed the values. And the last thing I'll say is that 90% of the people I see throughout Central Asia, they all want to leave. So you have a brain drain. If you have good people with smart ideas, they recognize that their future in these countries are minimal, so they leave. And most of them are women. And when I ask them why, and most of them, I'll start off by saying, it's a convenient survey, not a representative sample. They all say women have no rights. A woman's identity that is to be married and to have children. That's her identity. Professional women I talk to have the same, beliefs that if I don't have a son, I'm not, fulfilling what my husband wants from me. So these values that are systemic in the country are pervasive and they continue to go. And we've got to change that value system, to a point where, even religion, the communism had one religion called communism. Any other thing would threaten them. Well, even in I've seen the transformation in Kyrgyzstan of all the mosques being built and all the people going. And so my students say, oh, I have to go to mass, to services on Friday. And I watch them and they leave campus because I can't say no. They leave campus and they don't go to the mosque, they go in the other direction. They go to pray. They go to do something else, but they use religion as a reason for getting out of class. So when I look at the GPAs, grade point averages, I've been in Kyrgyzstan for 6 years now, 2 in Manas, 2 at American University, and now 2+ in, the women always have better GPAs than the men do, because they see themselves studying, getting a scholarship, and getting out of Kyrgyzstan. I saw it in Armenia, I saw it in Afghanistan, I saw it in Azerbaijan. You have a brain drain, and it's usually the women who have better grades, spend more time studying, get scholarships, and get away. So I don't see how democracy is going to evolve anytime soon in Central Asia. It's unfortunate, but I just don't see it evolving quickly because you got a brain drain, and it's usually women who have better scores that leave, and that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you very much for your opinion. Dear Professor, what do you think about activity of our civil society? What do you think? What do you think about people's protest in Kyrgyzstan?
Well,
our citizenship are very active, and we have 3 revolutions, people's revolutions. What do you think about this process?
Let's look at the last election, revolution election. I talked to many, many, many people, both in Ush, Jalalabad, and Bishkek. And a lot of them were saying we were given 2,000 Psalms to vote for X. So you don't know whether they did vote for him or they didn't vote for him, but they got 2,000 some. They were willing to sell their votes for money because you have no economy. You know, you have if you look at Central Asia population is as large as that in Europe. The buying power, the potential buying power in Central Asia is greater than Europe because you have two countries that have a commodity the world wants, Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan. You know, that's why China's doing everything in that region, because they see a potential of making money and using soft power. So, I mean, I could, I spent some time in Kazakhstan, but I've never really taught there or anything like that. But I can tell you that because money is an issue, salaries are poor. The average salary in Bishkek is $200 a month. Where does your allegiance lie? In a developing country, you need to have a certain level of GDP in order to start thinking about all these other things in life. But when you're subsistence living, going from paycheck to mouth, you don't have the luxury to think about the future. You're just trying to survive. You're consuming, And so the people who are smart, I see them time and time again. The women by far are smarter and willing to invest in an education in Bishkek at any one of the 3 universities so they can get a scholarship and get out. I have gotten so many women to universities under Rasmus or in the United States. I've gotten 3 people doing their PhDs in the United States, and a total of about 50 other doing masters in the United States or masters someplace else. Only one is a male. Only one is a male. They're all females. And I have a good student right now that I want to get out. He says, no, I have to stay home and take care of my family. That's the mentality. One last thing. In my culture, I'm Hispanic. I was born and raised in Panama. In my culture, we send the men away and we keep the women close. In your culture, you send the women away and you keep the men close. That's a message that women have no value. I get on my horse, so I better get off of it now.
Okay.
I'll be back, Cholpon. I'll be back. I'm in the States now because I had an emergency. But I'll be back on the 18th. We can continue this conversation when I get back. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you. Please, who else can have questions or comments? Please, our listeners.
I think I want to stimulate the discussion. Professor Michael, you mentioned that there's no democracy for Central Asia. What do you mean by democracy?
Okay, democracy starts with a value.
Right. Yeah, everything's based on democracy by itself is not the end.
I agree.
It is for some goal. What is that goal for democracy? For any country, if you want to develop a democratic system, and you see what is the purpose for that system or the regime, any regime, a democratic regime or any regime, they have something want to achieve. And for Central Asia, as you mentioned, you're more experienced as you were there before many times. But in Central Asia, the culture, the tradition is significantly different from here, where I am for 20 years in the US. And I cannot, for me, it took time to adjust this culture differences and all culture shock, but then so then I see democracy is the relationship. How do you balance the relationship between individuals and the community? and and how to govern the community. As you pointed out, the institution is important, and now we can see the collapse of institutions in international levels, in a national level, and it's not the Central Asia's the democracy in Central Asia has its own way to, through their experience, and to implement these values. And you see,
I agree wholeheartedly with you. I mean, the democracy we have in the United States, I equate it to, you know, a painter with a canvas. He has a blank sheet, you know, and you got to look at the evolution. The founding fathers came from England mostly, where they only had the king, the prime minister, and the House of Lords. They didn't have the House of Commons in 1700s. So the people who left the United States left because of political oppression, left because of economic oppression, left because of religious oppression. So they came with a set of ideas of the kind of government they want. So the United States started off with a clean slate. And these guys, these smart people that came from Europe, you know, because of political oppression, religious oppression, or economic oppression, they said, we do not want to be oppressed. We want a United States of America that takes care of the needs of the people. Remember, under England, you only had the House of Lords, which means the rich people benefits and rights were being taken care of, not the commoners. You know, and so we created a House and a Senate, you know, to take care of the people. And so the purpose of government, the only purpose government has, is to make life better for the people. And so you have that mentality, that value is I'm taking care of the people. You know, so whether it's local government or whether it's state government or whether it's federal government, you know, I mean, the United States was not a democracy in 1929 because women couldn't vote. So it's evolutional. It's not revolutional, it's evolutional. You know, in some states in the 60s, the blacks couldn't vote, you know, but the people saw the injustices being done with women and with blacks, you know. So we're a melting pot. We got all kinds. Like I said, I'm Hispanic. I was born and raised in Panama. My dad's an American. My mother's a Panamanian. You know, I speak multiple languages. You know, I've been multiple cultures. And so it's a value system that the people have and say, hey, you know, if I get into power, my sole purpose is to make sure my community's taken care of, you know, and the people, when we grow up, will say, you know, community service is important to us. You know, and so that's a value system that doesn't exist right now in Central Asia.
Yeah, so that's precisely the issue. Here it has its own value system, and there they have their own value system. You can't see their value system is not compatible with the democracy. What they have to do, there's values that respect authority. That's the tradition. It doesn't mean the family. They respect parents is first and foremost, and this is value system, and it is need to develop and carry on, and need to be enriched and enlarged, and then say what the people are doing in Central Asia and the other countries. It's not their value system nothing good, but they have their tradition. You can't use another set of value system to replace another value system. It won't work.
I agree with you, but every country I see, they all want three things. They want opportunities for education and employment. They want a safe, safe environment, and they want the freedom. That's the foundation of democracy.
Here, I cannot walk as soon as it's getting dark. Where is the freedom?
Well, I mean, for instance,
we know what, excuse me, we know very good what is freedom. Nomadic culture basis on freedom. So therefore, it's our basic value.
Yeah, well,
So
let me use an example.
yeah.
You know, I teach at Almaty. I'm a part-time teacher. I have the freedom to say, no, I don't want to teach that course, or no, I don't want to teach. I want to go back home. Economically, I'm taken care of. I know I've been 2 pensions, so, you know, so I have the freedom to choose. But most of the teachers don't have that freedom because they don't pay you enough. You go from one institution to another institution to another institution chasing the dollars. So where is your allegiance? Where is your home?
Yeah.
And I would like to continue our discussion. I agree with, of course, with Michael about the current situations where we can see the very weak civil society sectors and some indicators that provide on institutional level and the level of subjectivity, self-expression. It's an economic GDP. Of course, it's very, very important criteria. But at the same time, it's from my point of view, as I said by my talk, that the Central Asia has the period where we can see the rise of genius scholars, scientists, and it was connected with the self-expression and freedom. And you'll see from 9th to 12th century, it was really, of course, it was caliphate, and but we can see the quasi states like Samanid and who tried to preserve some independence, and they tried to focus on the intellectuals and society, diversity. They provide diversity. It's competition between different intellectual centers, between Khwarezm and Bukhara, Samarkand, and it creates this kind of pluralism and provide the growth of civil society. The problem for Muslim society in this period was related that they didn't institutionalize this kind of innovations and to preserve this diversity. And the level of the 12th century will see the Seljuk and they came to conclusion. Nizamul, for example, he came to conclusion that diversity is like chaos. Pluralism is chaos, it's dangerous, we need to preserve. And they created the state institutions that combine the primordial level and state level. They just remove pluralism because they try to control the traditional networks, and they control and they transform the traditional great networks with from traditional living traditions into traditionalism. And now we can see that the last presenter said that about the Sufi networks, and the Sufi, you know, the Sufi didn't involve in political sector, they were excluded from that but they preserved the diversity, they preserved the pluralism via networks, because it's mystic networks, and they came to our society. That's why the Taliban and Salafism, they destroy these networks, because they feel the strength of this capacity and the dangers from these networks. And you will see the Taliban, they use this is traditional networks. It's very totalitarian system, and they spoke about the true and some Islamic values, but they can't transform. They don't have real instrument in order to articulate these values on the language of modern social practices. The problem is how to motivate, how to find this value system, and how to transform in the level of civil society, and it's related with economic also.
Yeah, well, I mean, I concur with you. It's all about control. If I'm going to lose control, what am I going to do? You know, if I lose control of my country, then, you know, I don't get the wealth of the country. If I lose control of my business, my business collapse. So it's all about power and control. And even in the United States right now, we do not have the United States. We have blue states and we have red states. You know,
but
You know, so it's all, I don't care where you look at it, it's just people want to maintain the status quo. You know, and they don't want to give up any control. You know, look at Russia and Ukraine. Russia did not want a prosperous Ukraine that's democratic, that's moving towards, you know, the EU. It was a threat to them. So we had to control Ukraine. You know, look at Kazakhstan in November, you know, I mean, was it November? Yeah, when you had the demonstrations, and the demonstrations started off as because of high gas prices. The government lowered the gas prices, you still had the demonstration until you had to bring the military in. So the establishment does not want to lose control. You can see it in China. You can see it in, you know, in Afghanistan when you had Karzai there. You know, it's all an issue of, you know, it's a value and a belief that says, I want to be in control and I don't want to lose that control. I will give up a little bit, but I won't give it up all. You
Yes,
know?
but now we can see that now we have the crisis of national state ideology and value system.
Yeah.
And now we can see that the first challenge for national states comes from the transnational corporations. It's global economic networks that provide some economic issues. And in this case, I think that the Central Asia has some capacity in order to find, because the national state can't present in these networks because they're weak if you compare with transnational corporations and their networks. But as a region, and to provide some interest, national interest between the five countries in order to articulate own ideas as a civil society, because civil society is based on the common interest, because they should, they're afraid that they can lose a national identity, because, and they should to identify the tools and the values in order to articulate their interest. I think that this is maybe because maybe this is one of the chance for Central Asia to, of course, this is we have unfinished states, because we have very weak civil society sector. But I think that it's very important to find some balance between the different sectors in order to come to the level of second configuration.
Yeah, when you look at development, you know, you have to have a middle class.
Yes.
You know, if you don't have a middle class, you don't develop. You know, and so whenever, I mean, right now you got a pyramid. You got the very rich up here who control the country, and everybody else is down below. You need the evolution of the middle class increasing their GDP, increasing their wealth, then they can put pressure on the government to conform. You know, so you need a strong middle class. And I'll give you a prime example. Apartheid in South Africa. You know, you had the Afrikaners controlled everything, but as soon as you stopped their wealth, you know, there was a boycott done. And then now the middle class, the middle white class, started putting pressure on the government to change. You know, I worked with Mandela for years, you know, on several projects. And, you know, the middle class has to, you know, be the facilitator of change. You know, if you don't have a middle class, change doesn't occur, because, you know, the wealthy keeps control of the wealth, and the poor are the workers, the slaves, the people who have to live day to day. So you need a middle class in order, and that middle class has to have the value of, you know, we want the government to be transparent. We want the government to meet the needs of the people. You know.
Excuse me, dear colleagues. We should start second.
Yeah. If I may add to the discussion, Cholpon, can I say a few words about the new middle class that is needed in Central Asia to pressure on the government? Before it comes, let us put an issue of grassroots level. at the grassroots level, which you call, Michael, very justly the poor, the peasants, the people who are on the land. The first thing that an attempt for democracy can do for the people is to protect the tiny income the poor people elevate on their land, not to be subjected to mafia structures. That is the grain and the essence of any movement towards democracy. Protect the poor, give them a chance, either to get an education or to get an income. They do that on their own. The young boys go abroad to earn a living for their families, and the families are big, so they can send them either to Russia or to any other place where money can be obtained by physical labor. Now, today, we speak about transnationals. Forget about them. This transnationals is part of the globalism. We are in the time where globalism would be replaced by planetary things. We are on the same planet, and that is important. And for the planet, the instance and the existence of Central Asia is vital, because it is here that you can put up another attitude toward life that has been developed in the US and in Europe. It is a communalitarian attitude. It is the shoulder to shoulder. It is a sort of mahala rule in Uzbekistan and elsewhere, where small factions of neighbors are more important, shoulder to shoulder, to upkeep your minimum level of subsistence, and above that, to develop chances for the new generation to develop democracy. Because fathers and grandfathers are not for democracy, and they would not vote unless you give them 2,000 soms to enjoy a bit of living. But what is important is the understanding the value of authority. That is the voice of the intellectuals that we have, and Pulat is saying it correctly. We have to pressure the government in the regional, trans-regional organizations like Shanghai Organization and other units, where the issue of equality and the issue of reaching help for the distant, remote and mountain regions where people only survive, like Pamir region. You know, if you go to Horog, people live there quite differently before they can get to Osh in the summer. So how to sustain their living? That is a most important issue for all the areas. Now, this is where we have to start. Let us agree at our conference that we want to support primordial values of the poor people. We want to be in common understanding, in a sort of contemplation about the ordinary people in their small sections. This is where we can start. If we do this, we cannot ruin the hierarchy of big families who rule and come to power in our republics. That is true, but we must reinstate their list of values. Apart from being rich and multi-rich, let us consider a bit the chances for the ordinary people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Nemchinov.
I'm from Institute of Oriental Studies, Russian Academy of Sciences, and I stay in Moscow. Thank you.
I'm glad to meet you. Thank you very much for your opinion. Okay, dear colleagues, and now we should start the second part of our seminar. And next report, Professor Shermuhamedova, Nigina Shermuhamedova, her topics of her report. Just a moment. Can you say about gender problem, gender equality? Just
Uzbekistan. Lessons of history and development prospects. Just a moment.
A list of speakers. But you can start. Dear Professor Shermuhamedova, please, your report.
We are starting. In the third millennium, one of the areas of social policy of Uzbekistan is to ensure the legitimate rights, freedoms, and interests of women, strengthening their role in public and private life, as well as achieving gender equality. In this
So, excuse me, I should inform that your translator support you. Is it right, Nigina?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
I am reading her report.
Okay.
Can I continue?
Yeah, sure.
In particular, a commission on ensuring gender equality has been established. The activity of the Committee of the Upper House of Parliament on Women and Gender Equality is aimed at developing proposals for the implementation of state gender equality, and today parliamentary contribute out and the committee monitors the implementation of the tasks set to ensure gender equality. Consistent work of the parliamentary commission is being carried out to monitor the implementation of the national priority goals and tasks in the field of sustainable development for the period up to 2030. It is gratifying to note that the fifth goal of this program is dedicated to ensuring gender equality and monitoring the implementation of legislation, conducting a critical analysis of public control over the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the main tasks of the activities of the Republican Public Council of Women is the comprehensive support of women and girls, coordination of issues related to the implementation of the provisions of the UN Convention on Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, and the implementation of Beijing Platform for Action and the National Action Plan. In the Women's Public Council, activists who know the problems of compatriots identify key problems in their lives and provide significant assistance in eliminating them. Local heads of women's councils are advisors to hakims or governors on women's issues. They also serve in chairs of Republican and regional funds to support women. One of the priority areas of the ministry to support the mahalla and family is comprehensive support for women, assistance in organizing their family and private businesses, handicrafts, obtaining knowledge and skills for professions that are in demand on the labor market. A special Republican working group has been created to study and identify problems of women in all regions. Purposeful work has been organized to reduce poverty and improve the welfare of the population. The new Women's Notebook system, introduced at the initiative of the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, makes it possible to carry out targeted work to eliminate complex life problems, systematize the number of people in need of help, and organize targeted work with vulnerable segments of the population, and an electronic system of social services for 30 types has also been introduced. Thanks to the systematic approach to the electronic system, 520,000 people were employed in 2020 and 21 alone. Over the past 3 months, the Republican Commission has satisfied 80,000 women's requests for assistance. 32,000 of those who find themselves in a difficult life situation and in need of social support have been provided with jobs. However, given the situation, new mechanisms will be activated in the context of each mahalla or community, each family, in order to more effectively solve existing problems. At present, the responsible departments, banks, hokimiyats, or mayor's offices, the newly created advisory councils of women in mahallas under the leadership of the Federation of Trade Unions are studying in detail the problems of more than 6 million women through door-to-door visits. Based on the results of the study, the lists of those in need are updated and practical solutions are being sought for many socio-economic problems that concern women. Uzbekistan attaches great importance to enhancing the role and status, protecting and exercising their rights and freedoms of women. As part of the implementation of action strategy, as well as in order to organize consistent work on the implementation and achievement of UN Sustainable Development Goals for the period up to 2030, Uzbekistan has developed 9 targets aimed at ensuring gender equality and empowering all women and girls. In accordance with the targets or tasks, by 2030, it is necessary to eliminate all forms of discrimination against women and girls everywhere, ensuring gender equality, the full and effective participation of women, and equal opportunities for women to lead at all levels of decision-making in the political, legal, socio-economic, and humanitarian life. Also, the SDGs provide for the most complete implementation of the principles of gender equality in the process of adopting state programs at different levels of government. In Uzbekistan, special attention is paid to the radical increase in the role of women in the public and political life of the country, and the improvement of legal framework is one of the priority areas of this program. Therefore, it should be noted that Uzbekistan is an active participant in the implementation of international treaties that provide for the legal, social, and economic protection of women from any form of discrimination and harassment. Gender-oriented laws have been adopted, such as on guarantees of equal rights and opportunities for women and men, on protection of women from harassment and violence, on protection of reproductive health of citizens, on amendments and additions to Article 15 of the Family Code, on amendments to the Labor Code of the Republic of Uzbekistan. Experts from such UN agencies as the UN Development Program, the Population Fund, the Children's Fund, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Office on Drugs and Crime, the International Organization for Migration, and the International Labour Organization participated in their development. More than 20 decrees and resolutions of the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, resolutions of the government of Uzbekistan were also adopted. Mandatory gender legal expertise of legislative acts has been introduced aimed at eliminating the inconsistency between the provisions of regulatory legal acts and the principles of gender equality, and identifying possible risks of a discriminatory nature in the process of their application. In this regard, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Central Asia, the head of the UN Regional Center for Preventive Diplomacy for Central Asia, Natalia German, noted that the international community highly appreciates the efforts of Uzbekistan in the field of gender equality. The implementation of the norms of these laws contributes to an increase in the proportion of women to 33% in leadership positions and 45% in the total working population. This also indicates a noticeable increase in the representation of women politicians and women leaders in all areas, the country's consistent progress towards achieving gender equality. a strategy for achieving gender equality in Uzbekistan until 2030 is being developed, which will ensure equal rights and equal opportunities for women as well as men in public life. In this regard, Elena Armitage, the regional director of the United Nations Population Fund in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, emphasizes that as a result of the implementation of this strategy, more women leaders will appear in Uzbekistan. Urbanization will take place in a sustainable manner. Stable socio-economic development will be ensured. New opportunities will be created, especially for girls, current and future leaders. Their potential will be realized. A healthy lifestyle culture will be formed eventually in society. Everyone knows that the global pandemic has had a negative impact on the development of society and states. However, despite this problem, 2020 has become a turning point in the field of ensuring the rights and freedoms of women. For instance, the population, in particular women and children, can use modern high-quality medical services. Medicines are freely available. The basic principle of the country is being implemented. Care for the health of the mother and child is a concern for the whole society, for our future. We will quote a short text from the press release of the administration of the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan. From the beginning of the new school year, the contract money for girls studying for a master's degree will be fully reimbursed from the budget. 200 billion sums for 23,000 girls. I'm sorry. Every year, 50 girls are sent to prestigious foreign universities for bachelor's degree, for obtaining bachelor's degree, and 10 for obtaining master's degree. In each region, the education contracts of 150 girls from needy families, orphans, will be paid from the local budget. Students with young children will be able to study remotely or online. At least 300 target quotas are allocated annually for doctoral students. We support and create conditions for women who want to study at all levels of the education system, said the President. Uzbekistan's experience in deep reform and development of a quality healthcare system and the pharmaceutical industry in the country, public health protection, and the formation of a healthy lifestyle culture in society ensured the successful fight against the pandemic and was recognized by experts. In particular, given the conditions of the global pandemic in 2020, 14.8 trillion sums were allocated from the state budget for reforming the healthcare sector, which is almost 1.5 times more than in 2019. As also, within the framework of the investment program, 1.15 trillion sums were allocated to this sector. For the effective fight against coronavirus, medical institutions have been built in all regions of the Republic. All quarantine zones are equipped with necessary technical equipment and medicines and diagnostic equipment. Measures have been taken to mobilize the entire healthcare system to work under emergency conditions, and the practice of retraining medical personnel is being purposefully carried out. Suraya Dalil, the director of the World Health Organization Department for the Global Coordinating Mechanism for the Prevention of Non-Communicable Diseases, wrote, while there is an acute shortage of health workers in many countries, measures are being taken to train well-trained medical personnel in Uzbekistan. However, the vast majority of health workers are women, so investing in the health workforce is promoting a gender perspective. or the employment of women entrepreneurs in the context of a pandemic and the implementation of state programs. Every family is an entrepreneur, comfortable village and comfortable mahalla. 5 important initiatives. Commercial banks of the Republic have opened special lines of loans. In recent years, more than 3,000 people, women, have been allocated preferential loans worth 7.4 trillion sums to develop women's businesses. In 2021, about 1.5 trillion sums were allocated to women and entrepreneurs from the Fund for Reconstruction and Development of the Republic of Uzbekistan. As a result of the vigorous activity over the past 4 years, more than 600,000 people, women, have been employed. More than 100,000 have been assisted in the development of private entrepreneurship. In order to systematically organize entrepreneurship training and preferential lending to women entrepreneurs, women's business centers were created in the regions in which more than 60,000 women were trained in short-term professional courses in 2020 alone, and as a result, 172,000 women began productive activities during the pandemic. Rehabilitation and adaptation centers have been set up in 190 cities and districts to strengthen measures to prevent various forms of violence against women. The main tasks of these centers is to provide emergency medical, psychological, social, pedagogical, and legal assistance to persons in a difficult social situation. In order to financially support these centers, in 2020, the Women and Family Support Fund allocated almost 1 billion sums. Also, the public funds allocated state grants for 15 organizations created under the Oli Majlis or Supreme Assembly to implement projects to combat violence against women and girls. Also, in order to protect victims of domestic violence, as a resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers on measures to improve the system for protecting women from harassment and violence was adopted on January 4, 2020. To provide legal and social assistance in the system of Ministry of Internal Affairs, 360 positions of female inspectors have been created. Procedures have been developed for a joint response to gender-based violence for law enforcement agencies, healthcare workers, and socio-psychological sphere. All this activity is aimed at providing quality support to women affected by violence. Raising public awareness of gender equality and women's rights is of a great importance. On the basis of relevant persons are consistently trained to work with women to improve the quality of ensure gender equality. Uzbekistan is developing cooperation with the UN in the field of improving the status of women and them in accordance with the Convention on Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, as well as the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. For the purpose of social regulation, Uzbekistan submits information on the implementation of its obligations to eliminate discrimination against women to the UN Committee. In particular, in 2019, the 6th periodic report of Uzbekistan on the implementation of the provisions of the convention was considered. As a result of their consideration, a roadmap was prepared for the implementation of the relevant comments and proposals of UN international experts, who also noted many positive changes. The progress made in changing the role and status of women in the political, socio-economic, and cultural spheres of the society. Uzbekistan has resumed practice of inviting UN special rapporteurs to the country in various areas of human rights. For instance, the UN Special Representative on the independence of judges and lawyers, Diego Garcia Sayan, in his speech positively assessed the reforms in the judicial and legal sphere, ensuring the independence of judges and the adoption of fair judicial decisions in Uzbekistan. At the 46th session of the UN Human Rights Council, the head of the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Mirziyoyev noted new horizons for deepening cooperation between Uzbekistan and the United Nations in the field of achieving gender equality. And he substantiated the expediency of holding a dialogue of women leaders of the Central Asian countries, as well as a business forum that will allow the exchange of experience in the field of empowering women, preventing any form of violence against women, and also contributed to strengthening cooperation in this area at the international and regional levels. In general, worthy living conditions have been created in Uzbekistan for more than 17 million women. In general, there is a dynamic growth of women politicians in Uzbekistan, both in legislative and executive bodies of power, and among representatives of the judiciary system. For instance, in Uzbekistan in 2020, the global share of women in national share of women in parliament was 25%. According to the results of the parliamentary elections, at the end of 2019, women represented 32% of the deputies of the legislative members of the legislative chamber of the Supreme Assembly and 25% in the Senate. And this data is the fact that Uzbekistan is among the top 50 countries out of 190 in ensuring gender equality, ahead of almost all post-Soviet countries. This indicates the fundamentally new approaches to organizing the activities of the Uzbek parliament as well as gender equality. Thank you for your attention.
Yes.
Excuse me, have you finished?
Yes, we have
Okay.
finished.
Thank you, Professor Nigina Shermuhamedova, for your report. Okay, thank you. And next report, Professor of the Regional Academy of Management, Baurzhan Nurumov, Kazakhstan, Pavlodar. The theme of his report, the role of fine arts in the democratization of a Kazakhstan society. Please, Nurumov, Professor Nurumov, please. And I also see your translator besides. Okay. Please open turn on microphone. Microphone, please. Turn on microphone. Translator. Microphone, please. Turn on microphone. Please. Problem with microphone. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Cholpon Alieva, sizga ko'p rahmet muna webinarga chaqirganingizga. Hello everybody. Cholpon Alieva, I'm really happy that I'm honored to be invited to participate in this webinar by you. Thank you. С вашего позволения я воспользуюсь синхронным переводчиком Жаныбек Ракимгулов. If you don't mind, I will use the interpreter Жаныбек Ракимгулов. Thank you. Ну, у меня тема роль изобразительного искусства в демократизации казахстанского общества. The topic of my presentation today is the role of fine arts in the democratization of Kazakhstani society. Искусство – это величайшая загадка мира, в которой зашифрованы истории нашей жизни. Art is the greatest mystery of the world, in which the stories of our life are encrypted. Art is our history, and in it you can find answers to those questions that even the most ancient manuscripts cannot answer. Изобразительное искусство является неотъемлемой частью духовной и материальной культуры. Fine art is an integral part of the spiritual and material culture. В философском понимании понятие культуры раскрывает сущность человеческого бытия как реализацию творческой свободы. In the philosophical understanding, the concept of culture reveals the essence of human existence as the realization of creativity and freedom. Какова же роль изобразительного искусства в жизни людей? What is the role of fine arts in the people's life? Now it is impossible to imagine that our life without art and creativity. На заре своего развития человек пытался осмыслить окружающий его мир. At the dawn of his development, a person tried to comprehend the world around him and figuratively transfer the knowledge gained to the next generations. So they were wall paintings in the caves. Искусство – это одна из важнейших ступеней в эволюции человека. Art is one of the most important steps in the human evolution. It helps a person to look at the world look at the world from different points of view. At all times, art has helped a person develop his abilities to improve abstract thinking. Как и 100 лет назад, люди все так же стремятся к прекрасному и вечному. Like 100 years ago, people still strive for the beautiful and for the eternal. The history of fine arts goes further and further in its development. New methods of drawing appear, computer technologies in this area, new materials, new techniques and approaches to art. Казахская национальная культура – это отражение истории кочевого народа. На протяжении тысячелетий по казахским Kazakh national culture is a reflection of the history of the nomadic people. For 1,000 years, nomadic tribes have roamed the Kazakh steppes, who have formed their own unique worldwide, created unique customs and traditions, and collaborated with neighboring peoples and cultures. В XIX веке многие казахи стали менять кочевой образ жизни на оседлый, и происходило развитие новых культурных. In the 19th century, many Kazakhs began to change their nomadic lifestyle to a settled one, and new cultural aspects of the Kazakh people were developing. Today, the culture of Kazakhstan is a huge layer of various types of art, traditions and life, saturated with the spirit of the nomadic past. В 21 веке культура Казахстана удачно вливается в мировое сообщество. In the 21st century, the culture of Kazakhstan successfully merges into the world community, and at the same time folk traditions and customs are carefully preserved from generation to generation. The knowledge and philosophy of the life of the ancestors who once conquered the vast Kazakh steppes are still passed on. You can get acquainted with the culture of Kazakhstan in numerous museums of the country as festivals and holidays.
Excuse me. So I think that translator can read the text. So it's not necessary. Speaking of speaker, translator, you can read the text alone.
Он говорит, что нет необходимости вам говорить.
So because we have limit of time.
Пускай текст читает переводчик, и у нас ограничение времени. Ты просто подсказывай мне.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. Работа там, да? Это убирает, у меня 11. The work of art, the work of fine art offered to the attention of the school students of secondary schools in the city of Pavlodar of the Republic of Kazakhstan was a work of Kazakh artist Tiljana Kokpar, meaning competition, national game. It was painted in 1960 for individual perception of high school students. 12. Okay. In the artistic culture of Kazakhstan, various types and genres of art arise and develop. Let us dwell in more detail on the art of portraiture, a genre that most fully expressed the new that appear in the artistic culture of the Kazakh people in the last century. The art of portraiture is determined by one of the main ideas of Kazakh art, the idea of glorifying humanity and man, admiring the beauty of his body, mind, and feelings. The increased interest in an active, enlightened personality is also natural. Portrait art became a means of expressing this interest. In the portrait four-man fisherwoman Saule, painted in 1962 by the Kazakh artist Shaykhmetov Kamil, we see the heroine against the background of the sea and boats. Here, the person is the portrait is depicted not in contradiction, but in thought. The artist impresses with his ability to convey the character of a young woman, her vitality and satisfaction with her work. Shaykhmetov perfectly reveals the main character traits, the inner world of the fisherwoman Saule, her perception of the world around her. In the portrait, the artist conveys the joy of life, happy and inspiring fulfillment from work by the expanses of the sea. The development of portraiture throughout the century testifies to a kind of democratization of the artistic culture of Kazakhstan, which also influenced the democratization of modern society in Kazakhstan. This is impressed fully in expanding the range of models in the 20th century of the last year. These were people of various professions, ordinary workers of the country. In the second, writers and actors, architects and musicians, scientists and artists. In other words, in the second half of the century, the portrait reflects the value of a creative person, famous for his talent and knowledge, and not for his origin. Secondly, the portrait becomes a mass phenomenon. It spreads throughout the country. The art of portraiture is mastered by many provincial artists. They create an extensive gallery of images, including
representatives of almost all segments of the population of various regions of modern Kazakhstan. Now portrait painters can rightfully be proud of the results of their work. They not only master the technique of painting, but also show the highest level of skill in depicting the inner world of a person, his character and mood. The development of the fine art in Kazakhstan was determined by the realistic quest, the desire of artists for direct life observation, which reflected the general process of bringing art closer to reality. Painters and graphic artists, that is, Kazakhstani masters of fine art, are approaching a freer, a broader, sometimes colored by spiritual excitement, perception, and comprehension of surrounding nature and man. A close interest in the issue of historical development and the fate of peoples, which was associated with the whole character of the advanced ideas and worldview of the people of that era, prompted artists to look for large generalization themes that would reflect significant moments in the life of mankind. Historical painting becomes to the fore in the fine arts. The development of everyday genre as well as satirical graphics corresponded to the task of depicting the surrounding everyday life of Kazakhstanis. Imbued with a lively perception, sympathy, and large senses of folk life are found in watercolors, drawings, and fine arts performed in other techniques, illustrating the works of modern Kazakhstani writers. According to the research of various areas of art, we can note that a deeply democratic in its content is developing in the modern fine arts of Kazakhstan, which directly affects the democratization of modern Kazakhstani society. The modern Kazakhstani artist of the brush expresses with observation, with the help of eloquent details, the nature of the situation, the typical life environment of heroes, unfolds a complex, sometimes dramatic action, depicts the characters and behavior of people with satirical sharpness. Small, intimate portraits are distinguished by subtle psychologism. The values of art are determined by the needs of interests of the individual and society, so they have a complex structure, a special hierarchy. It is based on the fundamental benefits necessary for the life of a person as a living being, natural resources, material conditions of life, and the highest values that depend on the social essence of a person, his spiritual nature. The aesthetic attitude to the world is included in the category of the main values, formation and development, which should be devoted to the educational process in the general education schools Kazakhstan. Here, the foundation of visual literacy, mastery are laid, and wide opportunities for creativity are revealed for students at the earliest stages of their development. Visual activities are considered as one of the most important means of moral and aesthetic development of the student's personality, contributing to the formation of an aesthetic understanding of the world around him, the development of creative, imaginative thinking, artistic and figurative perception. Of no small importance are the role of fine arts and the activation of artistic and creative activities and aesthetic education of students in the general educational school and students at university as one of the factors in the democratization of Kazakhstani society. Philosophers of the 19th and centuries often spoke about the values of the truth, goodness, and beauty, about their unity. The truth is a value when we include in this concept the destiny of a man and the dream of the ideal state of our society. Values in the process of internalization become value orientations. That is, personal ideals and attitudes of a person. Ms. Kiryakova, considering the formation of orientation, distinguishes three phases. She connects the first phase with the ascent of the personality in the world of values into the world of value relations. The second phase with the comprehension of intrinsic value, which is associated with the reassessment of values, with the formation of one's own I, me, in other words. The third phase with the formation of one of the scale of one's own scale of values, a system of value orientation, designing the relationship of the individual to reality. When a person communicates with the art, a special psychological and physiological state occurs, which we call perception of art. It is saturated with a variety of experiences, evaluating significant spiritual states for a person. The following are involved in the process of artistic perception: the objective, real side, that is the work of the art itself; subjective, that is the person with his abilities, experience, and culture. The study of the peculiarities of children's perception of work of art, of course, is important for increasing its educational impact on the development of the individual, for advancing children to a more adequate and complete understanding of aesthetic experience of works of art. In the process of developing the perception of works of fine art by students of general educational schools, in the process of visual activity of children at school age, such qualities as morality, spirituality, etc. begin to form. A creative task given to children in the classroom put them in the situation of a creator, and the tasks that arise in the process of creativity draw them to the works of great masters, to the halls of museums, where they seek and receive answers to many creative questions. Indeed, and if at the beginning of their acquaintance with big art, children are more interested in what it is shown in the picture, then later they are already worried about how it is depicted. What impressive means and visual techniques the author uses to identify and figurative content of the work.
Закончить хочется словами Бертольда Брехта: все виды искусств служат величайшему из искусств, искусству жить на земле. Благодарю за внимание.
I would like to finish with the word of Bertolt Brecht. All kinds of arts serve the greatest of the art of living on earth. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so, thank you very much, Professor Nurumov, for your report. Okay, and so today last report of the expert of the state policy, Ministry of Agriculture of Kyrgyz Republic, Igor Taranov. The theme of his report, Organizational Culture and Values of Public Administration in Kyrgyzstan. Please, Igor Taranov, please. And please turn on your microphone. Don't forget. Igor Taranov. microphone. Turn
yes,
on your
yes, I'm here.
microphone. Okay, good.
So,
Okay. And you have only 20 minutes.
okay, so is it visible? Can you see my presentation?
Yeah,
Is
we
it full
can see.
screen? Okay, so hello everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to conference organizers, and my special thanks go to Professor Cholpon Alieva for inviting me to deliver my presentation. As a civil servant, I have had an opportunity to observe transformations within the Kyrgyz state management system from the inside, and this is the main focus of my today's speech. Democracy can be hardly imagined without respective democratic public administration institutions. Today, the improvement of public administration takes an important place on the development agenda of the modern society. The aspirations of citizens and their hopes for a just state have become the most important factors determining the current stage in the evolution of public administration. And as never before in history, the state is faced with demanding expectations from the citizens. And these expectations can be expressed in the form of values and channeled to public administration by means of organizational culture. And this is the topic of my today's presentation. According to the management guru, Peter Senge, we are on the verge of global change in the current management system. It seems that these changes stem from a new stage in the evolution of management, which requires philosophical reflection and deep understanding. Peter Drucker, in his writings, drew attention to the relationship between management and the cultural environment, arguing that management cannot be separated from the culture of society. Therefore, the institutions of public administration and public service may be considered as cultural phenomena. Such interpretation allows us to consider public administration from the angle of organizational culture and values. The 20th century demonstrated an evolution in the sphere of public administration from a totalitarian to a democratic state, and the rejection of the view that the state is the highest goal of social development. This is the new paradigm of philosophy of management, in which new models of public administration aimed at serving society have been formed. These models are new public management and good governance. In the format of the new paradigm, the state is turning from an active player, interfering in various processes, into a steersman who only indicates the course. The issue of values in public administration gained importance in the modern world. Values have become a powerful resource of soft power and will prevail on the development agenda in the future, causing cooperation and competition between states and within states. The leaders of the world powers in their appeals to their nations, first of all, demonstrate the value content of the proposed political course, trying to reach out innermost aspirations and feelings of citizens. You can see the examples on the slide. Despite the obvious evolution of approaches to public administration, the issue of values remains invariably at the center. Attainment of the goals set by the values is the task of public administration. Coming closer to the topic of my presentation, I would like to draw your attention to the following definition of values given by the Russian philosopher Nikolai Losky. He defined values as something all-penetrating, determining the meaning of the whole world and of every person and of every event and of every act. So what determines the meaning of democratic public administration? In their research, based on their review of multiple studies on public administration values, Jorgensen and Baurzhan found 72 such values. This slide shows some of those values. So, and this could be the possible answers to the aforementioned question about the meaning of democratic public administration. and definitely it's not an exhaustive list. The above-mentioned values of public administration are the leading criteria for assessing and justifying a democratic system. A high-quality level of public service is an indicator of the health of democracy. Francis Fukuyama warns against compromising democracy due to an inefficient and unresponsive system of governance. Achievement of the common good, justice, and happiness in the writings of ancient and modern philosophers is closely related to public administration, which our today's discussion proves. The culture of an organization, despite numerous interpretations, is understood mainly as a set of ideas and values, as well as observable and interpretable artifacts. According to the Dutch scientist Geert Hofstede, organizational culture is a manifestation of the axiological essence of national culture. It is logical that exploration of the organizational culture of public administration bodies can expand our understanding of the value dimension of public administration in general. Two famous researchers of organizational culture, Cameron and Quinn, built their approach to the study of organizational culture based on a comparison of the actual culture and the desired image. Values remain an invisible part of culture, while numerous social institutions and their artifacts can be observed. Given the invisibility of values and the visibility of the written provisions of legislation, rules, norms of social institutions, researchers get the key to the understanding of the value core of organizational culture. Therefore, in the framework of my presentation, I would like to brief you on the results of my study on organizational culture of public administration in Kyrgyzstan. I employed organizational culture assessment instrument as described by Cameron and Quinn, as well as hermeneutic circle for the interpretation of the core values as defined by the Kyrgyz authorities in the strategic policy documents. Moreover, the study was complemented by my own observations, as I'm a civil servant and can observe many processes from the inside. Various strategic documents issued by the president and the government of the Kyrgyz Republic during the years of independence were selected as target documents for the study. The proposed values are the most important characteristics of the essence of the phenomenon or actor, be it a head of a company or a head of a state. Following this line, I would like to present a summary image of the ideal value models of public administration and public service proposed during the period of independent Kyrgyzstan in chronological order. The impulse to find its own way of governance began after gaining independence in 1991. The issue of identity in terms of independent governance arose. It's not surprising, like the rest of the countries of the former Soviet Union, Kyrgyzstan turned towards the advanced, developed countries and respective management models. The period of our first president, Askar Akayev, can be characterized first of all by the fact that it was during this period that the model of the new public management was chosen as the ideal of public administration, with its values focused on efficiency, the quality of public services, cost effectiveness, implying the principle of doing more with less. The new public management model was also actively promoted during the presidency of Kurmanbek Bakiyev, the second president. In principle, this model of new public management has been consistently adopted by all presidents with various variations and is still practiced. The next important step in formulating national public administration model was made by President Atambayev, who proposed a medium-term national strategy for sustainable development for the period 2013-2017. The periods of the first two presidents of independent Kyrgyzstan were called the time of lost opportunities. As emphasized in the national strategy, mechanisms for reproducing and nurturing the professional elite haven't been created. Failures with the lightning-fast implementation of new public management principles in the first 2 decades of independence forced the ruling elite and the expert community to take a fresh look at the content of the civil service and public administration reform and pay attention not only to the goals and results, but also to value management. Continuing the value tone of the country's development set in the constitution, the authors of this national strategy, perhaps for the first time in the history of independent Kyrgyzstan, posed the following existential questions. What kind of country do we want to build? And what is the future of Kyrgyzstan? Attempts to awaken national self-consciousness were expressed in the ideas of independent development through the search for national development model based on historical experience. We can only be Kyrgyzstan is a summary of a 2-decade search. Attempts to build Central Asian Switzerland were finally recognized as futile. The difference between the presidents before and after April Revolution 2010 is that post-April presidents diluted new public management pragmatic market values with ethical values and an appeal to morality, which never happened before in our policy documents. Development program of the Kyrgyz Republic for the period 2018 and 2022, Unity, Trust and Creation, states that values should be implemented as a core content of the entire state policy, and governance of the country is based on the participation and well-deserved trust of every citizen of Kyrgyzstan. The gradual transition to value management has somewhat changed the content of the problems that have emerged in the system of public administration in Kyrgyzstan. Ethics in public service and the creation of new meanings on a national scale are added to the number of traditional problems. The development program notes that this issue is a serious one in public administration. The next policy document is a national development strategy of the Kyrgyz Republic for 2018 and 2040. It is the latest in the series of strategic documents that determines the present and the future of public administration in Kyrgyzstan. This strategy, approved by the decree of the president, underlines the key role of public administration and values in solving the problems facing the country. For the first time, an attempt was made to formulate a long-term vision. The strategy proclaims the following: a human being is the meaning of the existence of the state. Reliance on spiritual values and their priority over material ones. The spiritual and intellectual aspects proclaimed in the National Development Strategy create a value framework for the development of the state and society. The national strategy proposes a mixed model of public administration that combines elements of good governance, such as openness and opportunities for citizens to participate in governance process, changing the role of the state from a service provider to a regulator that develops policies. The second element is new public management, which is based on management by goals, performance improvement, public-private partnership, minimization of budget costs, compact state apparatus, and meritocracy. Next one is digitalization. The last one is value management. As I mentioned, that people are in the focus of development and considered as the highest value. And spiritual values are higher than the material ones. And this is our vision of ideal public administration model in Kyrgyzstan. And in this section, I would like to discuss two important points related to new public management model and organizational culture. Since gaining independence, the young Kyrgyz state has faced problems related to the need for economic transformation and the search for its own model of public administration. Attempts to carry out political modernization by simply transferring the standards of advanced democratic states led to the formal consolidation of the basic principles of democratic style of governance. On the other hand, they completely didn't take into account the historical, cultural, and socio-political characteristics of independent Kyrgyzstan. The desire to build a second Switzerland eventually caused an imbalance between the declared democratic values and the deep layers of the existing organizational culture in the public administration. The organizational culture of government bodies includes element of national culture in its genetic code and reflects the historical path of development of the state and society. Reforms in the public administration system inevitably face the issue of deep understanding of the characteristics of organizational culture through the prism of culture and the history of society as a whole. New public management involves working within open organizations using business methods, while the newly established republic carried a fair share of the Soviet bureaucratic legacy in public administration and was simply unfamiliar with an open organizational model. And this could be one of the reasons for the failure of these earlier democratic reforms. This is due to the fact that one of the central concepts important for understanding the value side of organizational culture is the concept of path dependence. In other words, the values and norms that influence the organization at an early stage of its development will determine its future. It becomes clear why the process of adaptation to new market conditions and the requirements of an open information society in post-Soviet public administration system is not so easy. The heredity of organizations is quite stable, even to changes in the external environment. The established norms and values of the administrative apparatus can even surpass the political will of the leader of the country and political elites. Diligently promoted for many years, the values of new public management, not supported by ethic values, in my opinion, are capable of undermining the essential basis of public service in Kyrgyzstan. Meanwhile, the ongoing attempts to optimize public administration system in Kyrgyzstan are mostly focused on the search for an optimal organizational design structure, leaving the problem of forming a complementary organizational culture within government bodies unresolved. An important feature of strategic documents published after 2010 is an attempt to combine the principles of new public management and value management. At the same time, the combination occurs without a complete understanding of the essence of values and their division into instrumental and terminal. The role of national culture in the formation of organizational culture is critical. However, we cannot ignore the reverse process, which can also take place: transformation of national culture through the organizational culture. Organizations, being social and cultural formations, are able to become a channel for introducing new values and norms. Organizational culture, as one of the organization's anti-crisis assets, has a potential to turn into an agent of social change. The organizational culture of public bodies, in this sense, carries a significant potential of renewal for the culture of the whole society. In the search for a national model of the organizational culture of public bodies, it is necessary to take into account that national and other cultural determinants become effective only when they are transformed into certain managerial values. And coming to the end of my presentation, the philosophy of management grows out of culture, which means that management models developed in one culture are not easily transferred to another. The introduced organizational structure and formal rules enshrined in legal acts are not able to automatically change the organizational culture, not to mention the historical path of the organization, which is actually ignored in this approach. The experience and the results of the introduction of management models in Kyrgyzstan raise an important question about the value component of public administration. It seems that the issues of ethics of civil servants and organizational culture are very relevant, and their importance will further grow, along with the technological side of management through the introduction of information technologies. Lack of understanding of the value basis of public administration and public service may leave Kyrgyzstan at the mercy of another so-called successful model, That's why Kyrgyz democracy needs a strong and robust public administration system based on deep understanding of history, culture, and values. As Mahatma Gandhi once pointed out, the spirit of democracy cannot be introduced from outside. It has to come from within. And this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for your kind attention.
Okay. Thank you very much, Igor Taranov, for your professional report. Thank you. And now I would like give the floor to expert Stefan Arscott from Cambridge University. London,
Hello.
Great Britain.
Thank you, Cholpon. That's right. I was a student at Cambridge University. I'm not a professor from Cambridge University, so I wouldn't want to.
Excuse me, Stefan, can we see you? Is it
yeah, sure. Yeah, I didn't mean to be blocked.
Yeah, please.
Hi.
Okay, good.
Okay. Yeah, I want to first thank you again for the invitation, Cholpon, after having not seen you for a couple of years, but you were right to find me. I'm still here in Bishkek. And I'd like to thank all the speakers for extremely varied and interesting talks, which have woken my thoughts on many topics which I hadn't thought about for a very long time. I think I should make general remarks, I suppose, because there's so many different talks. If I could make one just procedural, it would be useful perhaps to have a short abstract of a talk before the evening began, so that we could look at maybe 20 lines of summary and consider have some idea what the content would be before we hear the talk, because there are so many ideas moving very fast. That would be a suggestion for a future occasion. Michael spoke passionately about the lack of democracy in Central Asia, and obviously has immense experience. It reminded me of a thought of the psychotherapist Winnicott, Donald Winnicott, who talked about a patient with whom he was speaking, who felt that the situation was hopeless in their particular individual case. And Winnicott comments, we heard, or the patient made their comment, the situation is hopeless, and we carried on. And I think that is the spirit that you have to take some of the difficulties of democratization in Central Asia, that one notes these problems and you carry on and look for opportunities as they arise. It's the preparedness to take opportunities which will probably bring long-term success rather than expecting success. One other sort of thought that I might share, because in preparing for these lectures, I tried to brush up on a few thoughts. This was a book that I read some time ago by the historian Neil Ferguson, who is very well known and now quite Scottish, but now American citizen. He wrote a book called, I forget the title of the book, but it's about the divergence between the West and other cultures from about the 17th century to the 20th century. And it also concludes with a recognition of the convergence, obviously, in the late 20th century and 21st century with the development of emerging markets. But his subtitle of the book is The 6 Killer Apps. And he says by apps, he means institutions. So there are 6 institutions which he thinks have helped the West in its progress. And what's quite interesting about them, I might list them, but they don't include democracy. And I think there's an implication that Western progress which allowed it to develop. I think expressed that idea of a clean slate that the American Revolution was able to perpetrate, and we can't expect the same pathway for every society. But just to name them out of interest for you, so competition was the first one. So where there are elements of competition, there is an incentive for improvement. And so we can look at, in terms of for democratization, you'll look at these and seeing how are we doing, where are there these more micro opportunities, and how can we develop them. So competition at certain levels, competition, and Kyrgyzstan's made progress in various areas. Science is the second one. So the appreciation value of scientific method and of science is a crucial fact in the success of the West. On a very practical level, I wonder, having been a teacher most of my life in secondary school level, I was thinking, what would I do if I had $50 million to spend on development, and producing some type maybe of national institutional laboratories where maybe children in rotation or something like this could get the practical experience of scientific experimentation, which perhaps they don't get in their schools these days. If that could be achieved, then some of the excitement, some of the preparedness to be at next generation would be really helpful. The third of his acts is property under law. This is an absolutely essential, one of the great things to worry about. What can you actually hold on to? And coming out of a Soviet experience that have a particular resonance, to what extent you can hold on to your property, and the way property is now, I think, sidetrack, but property is internationalized through the ability of people to remove wealth from a country. I think a lot of analysis needs to go into how democratic civil society can track that, can become totally expressing how the money, that wealth disappears, where it goes, how it can be brought back. And I think there I would stress possibility of going on the offensive, on the front foot, challenging financial centers like London to ask what their responsibility is in looking or allowing this money to remain out of the country. The fourth of his 6 apps is medicine, which clearly is a very significant for the health of the population, and for obviously progress is made in that, but life expectancy here still significantly below that in some more developed countries. I think again there seems to be a role here. There's a lot of private clinics. This type of industry, I think, has quite a potential future with the lower wage rates. China took itself out of poverty through exploiting the low level of wage labor and finding work. The population, the education level here in medicine is not bad, I think, and there's room for creating clinics of high quality and excellence, even creating on something like Eshenkulova, a sort of desirable sanatorium-based culture. So there's again creating institutions of repute, giving the country some type of success in branding. The fifth one is consumption. so getting people spending creates wealth. The idea that they should consume, I think there's no problem there. I think people are interested in that. And the sixth one is work ethic, which might include the idea of professionalism, which has been mentioned before, honesty and a real attempt to achieve at a high level. So I just think that was just a list that might try to redirect us. There's a famous Shakespearean quote, by indirections find directions out. So sometimes we can't go at the task too directly, but if we go indirectly, we can find useful things we can do, which can prepare us for a time when democracy, when the conditions are more fruitful. It's been observed that democracy has taken a backward step throughout the world in the last 10 or 15 years. And so perhaps biding our time, being patient is the most important without giving up hope. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Stefan Arscott, for sharing your ideas, your comments. So it's very useful and very interesting. Thank you. And now I would like give the floor specialist in management from Kyrgyzstan, Turdukan Bekimbetova. Turdukan Bekimbetova, are you here? I see that you are Turdukan. Please.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Yes, thank you. It was very interesting to hear like professions from different fields. It was really like there was a really interesting insights. Just the last presentation by Mr. Igor Taranov was really interesting. He was talking about like my topic. That's why it was very interesting for me on like public administration. That there are a lot of like interesting moments that we are trying to teach our students and trying to implement. Thank you, Cholpon, Alieva. Thank you for your invitation.
Okay, thank you very much, Turdukan. And now, so we should conclude our seminar. And I would like give the floor Hu Yapin.
Oh, okay. I thought we might have another couple of questions. No more.
No.
Okay, great. There's some participants. Yeah, thank you, Cholpon, and thank for all the speakers for your sharing, for your insight. And at least I learned a lot. And even though I'm not in some of the fields in philosophy, but the way of expressing, especially about the value, the role of value in public management, and what does value mean? Value means weight, how heavy it is. The term of value came from commerce, and then you want to say which is what is more important, what is valuable. So what is more valuable in public management, also in the process of developing our country or our nation, and it's a challenge. But at the same time, in this complex, very complex, difficult, unsettling times, there's also opportunities for us, especially for the younger generation, to look forward and to open our horizon and to see what is for. What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of organizations, institutions, politics? Politics, according to Aristotle, is a community life. It's based on virtues. And what is do we still have that vision, that idea about politics? And only related to power or profit. So we need, there's many issues, the art, contribution of art and the aesthetics dimensions and the way of life. We cannot say we use a bow use mud to eat our food is primitive. It's a way of life, and it's our tradition. But in today's time, how do we carry on tradition at the same time and open to the new possibilities? So it's challenge and it's opportunity. And thank you very much for your contributions, and also thank you for your ideas. And if you have any suggestions, just let us know. And we invite all of you to join together to make efforts to make our humanity in a better place. Again, thank you very much for sacrificing your time.
Yeah, and I thank you very much, Hu Yapin, and thank you very much, Professor Mikhail Baranik. Thank you very much, Saltanat, Mamadkanova, and Sanibek Rahmankulov, and Professor Nurumov. Thank you very much, Professor Nemchinov. Victor, is it right? Your name, Victor? Victor Nemchinov, thank you very much for your opinion.
Absolutely right.
From Russia. It's very important for us, your support. Thank you very much, Igor Taranov. Thank you very much, Professor Aliya Masalimova from Kazakhstan, from Almaty. Thank you very much, Pulat Shozimov, Professor from Tajikistan. And thank you very much, Mr. Stefan Arscourt from London, Great Britain. Thank you, Professor Bogdana Todorova from Sofia, Bulgaria. And thank you, Professor Nigina Shermuhamedova from Uzbekistan, Tashkent. Thank you, Turdukan Bikimbetova from Bishkek. Thank you, Koshi. And thank you, Bermet Bakmurazova. Thank you, Mohamed Ziaul Haq Rafaki. Thank you for your participation. And let me end our seminar. I wish you all the best. All the best. And to see you in future. Thank you.
Cholpon, a word to Michael. Michael, welcome.
Okay. I like to say it's been a privilege, but one thing, a common thread that I see that Victor and Igor and Stephen all said was talking about the Constitution, organizations, it starts with the people. The people, the values of the people of the founding fathers is what wrote the Constitution. It's not the organization's values, it's not the organization's cultures, it's the people that make up these things. So we have to focus on the people, and get them going in the right direction. So the next generation of people have to have the appropriate values, and ideas in order to stimulate, and you have to have technology. If you look at the world, countries that develop have some technology that they have develop and sell to the rest of the world. So I think you guys are on the right track. I think especially the last three speakers are talking about, but even the one with Sufi and Wahhabism, in the United States, and I say, and my home is in Panama, so I say the same thing, is that the Judeo-Christian values, if you look at in the United States, the Judeo-Christian values is what values, that's a big thing. Christian, so religion has to play a favor in this whole process, and their values, whether, I don't care whether it's Islam, Judaism, Protestantism, or Catholicism, the values of believing in people have rights, and that people are good is the cornerstone of society. It's when you don't think people have that and you become very secular to the point that you've lost your whole identity, then that's when it is a problem, as far as I'm concerned. But thank you all very much. I appreciate it. This has been interesting for me. Someday maybe I'll visit Kazakhstan. but inshallah. Thank you.
Ma salama, ya habibi.
Okay, thank you again. Take care and have a good weekend.
Yeah, I'm gonna go eat now.
Thanks.
Thank you.